the perfect scenario. A public place, a tall structure, and an open motorcade. In November 1963, the opportunity presents itself. Not once, but 3 times.
Not only was there a likely conspiracy in Dallas to kill the president, but earlier in Tampa, Florida, and even before that in Chicago.
Mafia sharpshooters would take out the president, but the mob needs someone else to take the fall.
The reason that these 3 godfathers wanted to have a patsy involved in each one of the 3 attempts against John Kennedy in that roughly 2.5-week period there was that they wanted instantly for the attention or for the suspicion to be diverted away from them and toward Cuba.
Through their CIA and law enforcement connections, the mob learns about the men in each city most likely to arouse government suspicion, even be arrested after the president is killed. In Dallas, there's no better fall guy than Lee Harvey Oswald. In Tampa, another pro-Castro supporter, Gilberto Lopez. And in Chicago, a gun-loving ex-Marine, Thomas Arthur Valley.
There was also a Cuba connection in Valley's background. He had recently been training anti-Castro Cubans.
But only 3 days before the president's visit to Chicago, the mob loses its patsy there. Valley is caught during a traffic stop with a trunkload of rifles and ammunition. He's arrested, questioned, but never charged. The same day, there's another fatal blow to the mob's Chicago plan. Someone tips off the FBI that a team of hitmen is there trying to assassinate the president.
There were supposed to have been 4 men in this particular conspiracy.
Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden is on detail in Chicago when the FBI contacts the field office there about the plan to kill the president. What happens next shocks Bolden.
We were told no paper trail, that all of the files, notebooks, anything pertaining to that particular case had to be turned into the special agent in charge, and we were told that case never existed.
Kennedy's trip to Chicago is called off at the last minute. The official reason? The president needs to deal with a situation in Vietnam.
This cancellation was so sudden, people were already starting to line up along the motorcade route, but the Kennedys were able to keep a lid on this threat, and so it didn't reach the press at that time.
The assassination threat is never made public. Agent Bolden later tries to contact the Warren Commission on his own. He knows his superiors will be furious.
I think the Secret Service wanted to give one story, and they didn't want to have any conflict by what that they were officially telling the Warren Commission.
But days before he's to testify, Bolden is arrested. He's later convicted for bribery and solicitation on an unrelated counterfeit case. He spends 3 years in jail.
We've gathered a fairly abundant collection of evidence that Bolden was framed. And here's a guy who was really one of the people doing a great and noble job and thought he had information that was really going to help. And for this, his life is destroyed.
Why isn't there any mention of this Chicago assassination attempt in the Warren Commission report?
It does show how secret those attempts were, and that the secrecy surrounding those attempts were linked to national security concerns.
That man is here.
Now, when you were convicted in 1964, you held a press conference at your home and said the government had framed you.
In fact,
what kind of press coverage did you have?
That was long before I was convicted. See, when they brought me back from Washington, D.C. and lied to me and told me that they were bringing me back because they had just busted a counterfeiting plant out in the north suburbs and held me incognito, wouldn't let me call my wife or kids, eat anything, drink any water. It was 92 degrees that day. They kept me in a closed room, which we call in police work sweating a person. We call that sweating. When I saw that tactic being used on me, I knew that I was in deep trouble. I I knew that something was amiss. See, when they trick me here and tell me that they have something out in one of the suburbs that's all white, and they want me to go undercover in the all-white suburb, there's no way that they're doing anything but lying to me.
When you held your press conference, what kind of press did you get?
Oh, I got big press. I got the evening news on CBS. That was, no, it wasn't Walter Cronkite. Yeah, it might have been Cronkite. But anyway, I got a lot of press conferences. It was on the national news. It was on NCR. I had to do that. I really didn't want to do it, but that's the only way that I could save my life.
Did you ever
Because had
fear?
I not alert the public as to the real reason behind this, I would have become one of the 32 people in the Kennedy assassination that came up dead. See, because nobody would have known what this thing was all about. When it was revealed, they only had one option, and that option was to take away my mind and to discredit me by trying to muddy me up, because they couldn't kill me outright.
Did you ever fear living in your own house after you started talking about what had gone on?
No.
You were going up against a very powerful agency.
I know it. I know it. See, I had power on my side.
Had God?
Yes, that's right. See, God was my light and my salvation.
How do you feel now when you wake up in the
How
morning?
I feel?
What is on your mind when you wake up in the morning
The
every day?
salvation of my people. Delivering my people from this hell that we're in, these drive-bys. I got the solution to the drive-bys. All they got to do is read what I have written. And there won't be any more drive-bys if I can get these preachers on my side, these politicians on my side. Drive-bys, that's an easy problem. Whenever that you have a person in power who's asking you why these things are happening, he shouldn't be your leader.
Now, you were denied pardons by 3 presidents.
By 3.
That was Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama.
It didn't surprise me about Richard Nixon. Didn't surprise me at all about Richard Nixon. And then it didn't surprise me at all about Bill Clinton. But I was devastated that President Obama, not only did he not grant the pardon, we had 1,000 petitioners on a petition to President Obama. We never received even a response from him.
Did you receive a response from the other 2?
Yes. Even though they were denied. Clinton wrote me a nice
letter. Did they give you a reason
letter.
why it was denied?
Right. Nixon said that I had not been out of prison long enough. That was Nixon's reason. Clinton's reason, well, he was all messed up in this case here. He claims he never received it from the pardon board. That's what he
Will
claims.
you request one from President Donald Trump?
No, I am not going to ask. Now, a good friend of his, Roger Stone. Roger Stone is his right-hand man. Roger Stone, I had a talk with Roger Stone. And he says that he will see that my pardon is activated on. But if I don't have it now, I'll never get it. What I want to do now is build something or to contribute to the freedom of my people. All of my energy, 99% of my energy, all day, is giving grace to God and studying to free my people. And it's going to happen. It may not happen on the political realm, but it's going to happen. And so my children turn out fine. Praise be to my wife, Barbara.
Yeah, you and your wife Barbara were married for 49 years.
49 years.
What toll did this take on her
Oh,
when that happened to you?
It killed my mother, and it weakened Barbara. It killed my mother. My mother died about 5 years after I was released from prison. She just couldn't stand it. I mean, it killed her, and it made my wife deathly sick from 1985, you might say. After she retired from Nabisco and until the day that she died, it was very troublesome. I could see the decay in her when she would visit. But even though she was suffering, when I would almost break down, and you almost break down under those conditions sometimes, she would look me sternly in the eye. She said, "You gotta be strong. You gotta be strong." Almost like hypnotic. And I said, "I'm strong." Yeah. I'm telling you.
You gave to your wife.
Oh, listen.
Do you feel that your integrity and your patriotism to your country and tried to do the right thing by your country didn't pay off?
Well, the end is not here yet. See, as long as I'm breathing, I'm still working on the problem. So I can't say that it didn't pay off. You see, all that I can do is live a life, a godly life, a righteous life of love, harmony, peace, and justice. And then we'll see how it comes out. It's going to be all right.
Yeah. We at war. We at war with terrorism, racism, but most of all, we at war with ourselves. God, show me the way because the devil's trying to break me down. You know what the Midwest is?
Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. I was very tempted to play patriotism again since Mr. Bolden was asked about his so-called patriotism, but I decided to go with Chicago legend Kanye, and this song specifically because Mr. Bolden kind of sounded like that towards the end, like, you know, in spite of it all, he didn't sound bitter and angry and mad and militant, and didn't say he hated white people, didn't say God damn America. Remember that one from President Obama's minister, Jeremiah Wright, Reverend Jeremiah Wright from way back. He didn't say any of that. Chicago legend himself. He didn't say any of that. He said, "I am a godly man trying to do godly things and pursue justice." Reminded me of Neely Fuller Jr., Abraham Bolden, who is still with us all these years later. See? He listened to Kendrick Lamar. You heard he said, "Hey, it's going to be all right. We're going to be okay." Go ahead, Mr. Bolden. Today's date, Friday, May 2, 2025. So I have been told our 7th installment, Abraham Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza, the true story of the first African American on the White House Secret Service detail and his quest for justice after the assassination of JFK. So we're picking up last week. Mr. Bolden has been convicted, and not just convicted. They come to his house and he says, wait a minute, we got an appeal, and you know they normally give you a little nigga, you going to prison right now. And he tries to call his attorney and get his things, and be done with all that. So you gonna cuff me in front of my children? We cuffing you in front of your children. Cuff them too. They look like you got a generation of rapists coming along too. Keep an eye on them. Man, gonna take him off to jail. The audio that we heard at the beginning, the first portion, that was directly from the conspiracy files, the JFK assassination, that was mentioned in George Howard's book, 50 Years at the Bar and Still Sober, where he talked about all the years after everything went down. Mr. Bolden was in that documentary segment. You heard from it. Now, they assert that the JFK plot was a mob theory. You can hear all that there, but I did think importantly he talks about the total erasure from the public record of, wait a minute, there were multiple assassination attempts on JFK and this whole thing in Chicago, and how does this get not talked about, and it's not in the Warren Commission, and he wanted to go talk to them, and then he gets convicted. Like, all of that is right there in that segment, and it's on YouTube, so you can watch it if you are interested. I didn't even know about that segment until I read it in Mr. Howard's memoir book. And then the second segment, I gave us a little bit more from the Copy Line interview with Juanita Bratcher, black female, and they did this interview about a little more than a decade ago with Mr. Bolden. And when he said that he thought he could be one of the 32 people that came up dead, suspiciously connected to the JFK assassination, that is something that many people talk about, that is hinted at in the film JFK by Oliver Stone. That's also the very ending of Executive Action, which Mark Lane did the screenplay, as well as Donald Freed, who's connected to the O.J. Simpson case as well, and Jonestown. But isn't that wacky? Jonestown and O.J. Simpson and the JFK assassination? Wacky. Anyway, but at the end of Executive Action, they put up a list of people, and Executive Action is not a documentary. It is a fictitious film about the assassination, just like Oliver Stone's JFK. That said, they get to the end of Executive Action and they put up a chart of names, and they say that there are about something close to 32 people, several dozen people connected to the Kennedy assassination, witnesses, people who, said things, testified, who ended up dying suspiciously. When I say suspiciously, they have one person who died by a judo chop. I mean, just as suspicious as you like. Odd car deaths and all kinds of wacky things. That's why I keep saying over and over again, it is so. And this is a niggra. It was a lot of white people. I think that was a white dude who died suspiciously by a judo chop connected to this case. But I think it would have been so easy for a niggra, and especially an uppity, sassy niggra, to be, whatever, drug deal gone bad, or when, hey, give me a gun, Bolden, and I'll go out and I'll take care of that old Frank Jones and give that sort of thing. And say, oh, we got into a tussle and shot. He could have been killed so easily. A marvel that he's still with us. He would say, miracle, I told you, Jesus, right there with me. The segment where he said that they tried to muddy me up, those metaphors of white supremacy, like down in the mud and throwing mud. I think all of those are in Mr. Fuller's word guide. They are just in the system of white supremacy, racism, mud, dirt, being associated with non-white people, and something bad. That dirt and mud are vile and evil and repulsive. They're gonna muddy me again. Fuller would always say, hey, you ain't gonna have no cucumbers if you don't have no good mud. Facts. Let's see. They went into detail about him not getting a pardon, which has been corrected. All we needed, don't be dependent on no count obese. All we needed was the man, Joe Biden, get in there and do that pardon thing up. Now, I guess we might have to wait and see, because President Trump has been undoing a lot of what Joe Biden, his so-called legacy. But Joe Biden got it done. I am not surprised about that at all in terms of President Obama on his way, and his two-term president. I'm not surprised at all that he did not, offer up no goodies for Mr. Bolden on his way out in 2000, I guess the end of 2016 or very beginning of 2017. The way that he was hated and hunted, he easily could have been JFK, right? He had a historic number of death threats. Mr. Bolden talked about that too, the threats that Obama was under, attacks he was under. But imagine, he says, oh, and on the way out, me and Michelle, we talked it over, and we think it would be right, just for history's sake. The first Negro Secret Service agent, we think y'all wronged him, and we're going to pardon him too. What? And now, also, that means you might even be opening up. Why did all this happen to both? Like, Obese, are you saying that there was a conspiracy? What is it? Already had enough problems. Y'all tried to JFK me. Dude said, I love you, Brother Bolden, but you didn't. Yeah. I got children. I can't do it. I carried enough of the burden. I got to do, Anyway, but he did remind me of Mr. Fuller, Mr. Bolden I'm talking about. It just, like I said, he didn't sound bitter, and particularly he reminded me of Fuller a lot when he was talking about, hey, I'm trying to do correct things. I think about the liberation of my people. I think about producing justice. I think about in Chicago, what we gonna do about this black on black crime. Wow, don't that sound like Fuller? Minimize conflict. Dang, that sound like Fuller. He said, I'm not trying to make money about it. I got the books. You can download them for free. I'm trying to liberate my people. Don't that sound like he's trying to be universal man? Abraham Bolden, do right, brother. They say, we don't want you around here. Lock that nigga. He's crazy. He's crazy. I told you, don't listen to the say that's system of white supremacy racism. Anyway, we were getting, he has so much praise for his wife, Barbara, and how much he endured and how much she was a victim in all of this, too. And Matt losing her attempted spouse, it sounds like they were so happily married. They had all those children together, and she was such a big fan of his and spurring him on to different jobs, and then to have him wrongfully taken from her and all the financial stress. It's just, man. Anyway, bravo to Barbara Bolden as well. Mommy, attempted husband. Attempted mom, attempted husband. We will get to it. The Echo from Dealey Plaza. Abraham Bolden, Katherine Massey Book Club. Context of white supremacy.
God show me the way because the devil's trying to break me down. The only thing that I pray is that my feet don't fail me now.
At the county jail, Lowe led me through heavy steel doors and through rows of holding cells with prisoners behind floor-to-ceiling steel bars. I went through processing and was led into a large, filthy cell with about 20 men. The cell reeked of vomit and human waste, some of which was caked on the floor amid the scattered trash and cigarette butts, and some of which was from the single overflowing toilet. A few of the men in the cells seemed to be drunks, tossed into jail to sleep it off. After a few hours, a deputy called me out and escorted me upstairs to a smaller, cleaner cell with about 6 men. This one had metal cots lining the wall and an area where the detainees could take supervised showers. As I sat down at one of the metal tables bolted to the floor, a voice at my side startled me. "You're Bolden, aren't you?" I stared into the face of the young blond white man at my side and searched my memory. Had I arrested this guy, or someone close to him? Could he have some beef with me? "Yeah, I'm Bolden. Why?" He must have heard the apprehension in my voice or seen it in my eyes. "It's okay, man," he said. "Nobody's going to try to hurt you in here. Everybody in here heard about you over the TV in the day room. Arthur Rachel is the cell block barn boss around here. You know Arthur Rachel, don't you?" The young man lit a cigarette and offered me one. Although I hadn't smoked in months, I gratefully took the smoke and lit it up. "Yeah, I remember Art. He's locked up in a cell in the next unit, but by him being barn boss, he gets to do a lot of things around here. I talk to him a lot when we walk in the day room during the day," he explained. "Art told me something about your case when we were talking about you, and what a stupid move that guy Spagnoli made by going up against you with the feds." "What did he say?" I asked. I doubt Art would be trying to help me. I don't know him that well. I just saw him the day he was busted. "Art said the judge in your case got to your jury the night they found you guilty. Spagnoli was a personal friend of one of the guys that was serving on your jury. Spagnoli and this juror on your trial pulled off a burglary together, but nobody said anything so that this guy could stay on your jury. This guy called Spagnoli the night before they started voting and asked him how Spagnoli wanted him to vote." The young man had quite a story to tell. "What was the juror's name?" "I don't know," the young man answered. "And that's not all that happened. Rachel told me that while your jury was in the jury room, the deputy marshal went into the room and had conversations with the jurors about the verdict in your case." "Do you think that Rachel would talk to my lawyer?" I didn't really expect this man to be able to speak for Rachel, but wondered if he might reveal something about what Rachel was like, whether he was approachable or not. "I doubt it, man," he answered. "Rachel's not going to do that. He's sitting on 15 years now for passing those phony bonds, and that's a lot of time if he doesn't win his appeal. Call your lawyer. Maybe he could find out who the juror was that knew this guy Spagnoli. Sitting awake that night after lights out, I thought about the irony of finding sympathetic ears in prison after spending so many years in law enforcement, especially now, when it seemed like people I didn't even know on the outside were out to get me. I went over what I knew. Both Rachel and Spagnoli were small-time thugs, but they were ambitious. Agent John Russell had been developing information received from the Organized Crime Division of the Chicago Police that connected both men to a low-level mafia affiliate named Vito Zaccagnini, who was caught cashing the nearly perfect $100 counterfeit bonds, and who in turn had ties to Sam DeStefano. The way we understood things, DeStefano was allegedly a territory boss for the well-known mobster Sam Giancana. After President John Kennedy was assassinated, Giancana was mentioned by several conspiracy investigators as having some part in an attempt by the U.S. government to assassinate Fidel Castro, president of Cuba. The near-perfect quality of the counterfeit bonds that had been cashed suggested to the Secret Service that organized crime had a hand in the counterfeiting operation. In the morning, a guard came to summon me. I was due in court. Before long, I was shackled and seated on a bus with other prisoners, most of whom were taken to Central Police Headquarters in Chicago. The bus took me and one other prisoner to the Dirksen Federal Building, where the guards unshackled me and led me inside to yet another holding room. I heard a familiar voice arguing a point of law on the other side of the door, and realized I was outside Judge Perry's courtroom. A deputy swung the door open. "Let's go, Bolden." Inside, I saw Ray Smith standing next to the defendant's table in front of Judge Perry's bench. I looked into the spectators' gallery and quickly found Barbara's sad eyes staring at me. We nodded to each other. Smith began an impassioned oration on my behalf, citing my outstanding record as a government agent, describing the tainted evidence and admitted perjuries in my trials, and even invoking the name of Justice Douglas in his brief in support of my appeal. Judge Perry was only too happy to remind Smith that George Howard's affidavit stating that Spagnoli and Jones had fixed up the case against me carried no weight at all. "I just want you to know that you can just forget what Mr. Howard said in this case. I don't give any consideration to that affidavit," Judge Perry said. "Probation? I will deny it. I have denied it, and I will," he added when Smith raised that subject. Smith kept at it, though, insisting that my conviction was the result of perjured testimony, but Judge Perry remained adamant, insisting that I would serve the sentence he had handed down. Smith persisted, speaking about my hard work and steady performance at Ingersoll, which had sent one of its people to speak on my behalf, which Judge Perry did not allow. However, Smith was successful in receiving permission from the judge to read a letter from Dazzle Lucas, executive president of Ingersoll. The letter stated that it was our intention to appoint him as a permanent supervisor, and that Mr. Bolden had distinguished himself in the position of union leadership and safety committeeman. The judge appeared to grow irritated as Smith pressed the argument. "That is sufficient. No, I don't need anything more. That is the very purpose of all these trials, and I am not going to try it all over. Motion denied." Judge Perry was adamant. Defeat showed itself on Ray Smith's face, and he changed tack, stating that the news had reported that I was being held in the Cook County Jail, which housed many people whom I had arrested and who might wish to do me harm. He pleaded that I be moved to a different county jail, where my safety would not be jeopardized until I was transported to federal prison. Again, Judge Perry refused the request, arguing that the matter was outside his jurisdiction. Judge Perry was done, and brought the hearing to a close. I saw Barbara quietly confer with Ray Smith, who then turned to talk to one of the deputy marshals. The deputy led me down the corridor to the elevator, which we took to a small, clean holding cell, oddly situated behind a row of offices on one of the upper floors. The cell stood in a larger holding area, into which the guard brought Barbara. He left the two of us alone, separated only by the cold steel bars. I reached through the bars to take her hand. In that instant I felt finally overwhelmed by the terrible sadness of my fate. My whole body shook with rage and tears. Barbara looked me in the eye. "If we are going to make it through this, you're going to have to be strong. You don't have to worry about me and the children. I'm not going to let this break up our family. I saw what happened in court and how they treated you. I'll be here when you come home. You don't have to worry about that." Barbara's words were both consoling and reassuring. "You have to be strong because we are all counting on you to come back home to us. Nothing is going to happen out here, and I'm going to work and keep things together." Barbara came close, and we kissed through the bars. "No matter what happens, be strong," she said again. "I love you, and the children love you. We will be waiting for you to return home to us. Be strong." When the guard finally led Barbara away, I washed my face and resolved to do exactly as Barbara said. From earliest childhood I have been told that grown men don't cry, and I decided then that I was finished with crying. In fact, I would be as strong as any man could be. When they brought me back to the county jail, one of the guards took me down to a basement cell block. 4 cells sat separated and secluded from the rest. "This is what they call death row," the guard told me. "Someone decided to keep you down here until you're shipped out to a penitentiary." He handed me over to the kindly-looking black guard who stood watch there, saying, "This is Abraham Bolden. He used to be a government FBI man." "Yeah, I recognized him," the older guard said. The guard reminded me of my grandfather. They were about the same age, with the same small physique and medium-dark complexion, and even the same eyeglasses with clear plastic frames. "Has anyone been threatening you upstairs?" he asked once he locked the door of my cell. "Not really." "Well, you watch yourself. Some of these men are real animals and would do anything to anybody." The guard asked if I had eaten dinner and arranged to have some food sent down. He sat at his desk and swiveled his television set around so that I could see it. I watched a news report about my hearing, about Judge Perry denying probation as well as the motion to move me to a safer location. The station ran an editorial deriding the government and the Secret Service for their harsh treatment of Agent Bolden. Not that it could do me any good anymore. It grew late, and they dimmed the lights around me. I lay down on the small metal bunk and tried to sleep. Death row was a very, very quiet place. Chapter 16. Deputy Marshal Lowe and his partner arrived at my cell the next morning. The 2 men put me into a vehicle, and we began making our way through the city. "Where are we going?" I asked Lowe. "We're taking you to Terre Haute Prison this morning." I turned to the other deputy. "I don't think I ever met you. I appreciate you telling my wife how to stay in touch with me when you came for me on Wednesday. I saw you around the building many times and heard a lot about you before I actually went to your house," the man said, not unkindly. "I'm Lowe's partner. Lowe and I work together quite a bit." "I sure hate to meet you like this," I said, looking down at the cuffs on my wrists. "Oh, you're going to do all right, Bolden," he answered. "Terre Haute is a good prison, and they'll probably send you to the farm camp down there. Just try to stay out of trouble while you're doing your sentence, and everything will turn out all right for you." Lowe drove past the exit ramp I always took to my house, and eventually steered us out of the city. I realized that, but for my wife and children, I felt no great sadness about leaving Chicago behind. Things hadn't worked out so well for me there, but the truth was that I'd never felt comfortable in the big city. I'd come from a small town in Illinois and gone to college in another small town in Missouri. The gentler rhythms of those places and the brotherly warmth I'd felt among the people there were a part of me. I never got used to the daily indignities of urban life, the jostling and pushing, the loudness and the rudeness. I'd put in for transfers to other places and even applied for managerial jobs in corporations outside the city, without any success. Part of me regretted leaving Peoria, where I'd had a good job with the state police and a nice life, but I was like a lot of other young and ambitious black men back then. When the opportunity to move up the ladder presented itself, I couldn't pass it up. I'd thought that being an agent would help me get to the top of my profession, but the steel handcuffs around my wrists told a different story. We drove south for about an hour before Lowe pulled off the highway to stop for coffee and to use the bathroom. Lowe's partner went into the cafe while Lowe waited with me in the car. "We're about halfway there now," Lowe said. "I gotta take a leak too," I said, "but it's hard for me to do anything with these cuffs on." "I know how you feel, Abe, but you were a policeman for many years and you know the regulations. Whenever a prisoner is in my transport, we are supposed to keep him cuffed. You know that." "Yeah, I know the regulations. You know that I'm not going to try to escape or try to do anything stupid. The government knows everything about me. I wouldn't put your job in jeopardy by trying to run." Lowe looked up and saw his partner coming out of the cafe, so he got out of the car and spoke briefly to him. When they walked back to the car, Lowe opened the door next to me. "Hold out your hands." As Marshal Lowe unlocked my handcuffs, he said, "Okay, we're going to trust you and take these things off you, but when we get near to Terre Haute, I'm going to have to put them back on. We're doing this as a favor to you, so don't mess up now." I went inside and went straight toward the washroom. To my complete surprise, Marshal Lowe did not follow me, but simply sat down on a stool at the counter. The toilet stall in the washroom had a window, of course, one that opened very easily, and out of which I could see little else but rows and rows of corn. I stood on the toilet and stared out that window for one long moment, climbing down just as Lowe walked in. "Finish up, Bolden." Back in the car, I savored the coffee and sweet roll the two marshals had gotten me. With the cuffs off, it seemed to me like the sun shone a little brighter and the air tasted a little fresher. I nursed this last taste of freedom as long as I could. The first sight of the long double fence topped with glistening coils of razor wire snapped me back to cold reality. We had left the highway and driven on a series of smaller country roads before arriving at the massive complex of dark brown prison buildings. The car slowed as we approached, giving me time to take in the iron bars covering every window in sight and the forbidding watchtowers looming over the grounds. Marshal Lowe announced himself, and we were admitted to the prison. As they helped me out of the car and walked me through those heavy doors, I could see that these were no longer the cold, businesslike officers who had knocked on the door of my house a few days earlier. There was genuine sorrow on their faces as they removed my handcuffs and prepared to turn me over to the prison guards. "Well, this is it, Abe," said Lowe quietly. Even as he was gathering up his papers and preparing to leave, the guards began the admitting process, ordering me to first strip naked. "I hope that you come through this all right," said Lowe, turning to leave. "Bend over and spread your cheeks," said the intake officer. So began prison life, with the introductory humiliation of a strip search. Next, I was fingerprinted, deloused, decontaminated, and showered before I could dress again, now in a standard-issue one-piece white jumpsuit and cloth slippers. Finally, they hung a prison number, 23663, around my neck and took my photograph. I was officially a prisoner in the federal system. I scanned the faces of the trustees and other prisoners who passed by during processing and was surprised that I recognized a few from past investigations. I even saw the face of someone I'd seen in a mugshot and had been tracking for a long time before my arrest. Well, at least now I know why we hadn't been able to find him in Chicago. Guards escorted me out of intake and processing and through a maze of iron walkways and stairs to a row of cells marked Admitting and Orientation. The lead guard signaled with his hand, and the heavy barred steel door to one of the cells rolled open. I read the number 49 in large black letters on the wall above the cell door, consciously trying to remember everything about this moment. "Bolden, in." I stepped into the cell. A bunk bed bolted to the wall, a small metal storage locker, a stainless steel wash basin and toilet, and a small metal desk with an attached seat that swung out from underneath. Through the bars of the door I saw a large open area with rows of movable chairs in front of a television bolted to the wall, a ping-pong table, and some card tables. The ceilings were high, perhaps 25 feet. About 5 feet below the ceiling, light came in through barred windows. You hear people talk about the walls closing in on them. Before spending just a few hours in that cell, I had thought it was just a handy expression. But that day I felt as if the size of the cell was actually decreasing. I fought back a sense of dread and claustrophobia, knowing that what I was feeling was exaggerated by exhaustion and anxiety. I lay down, listening to the sounds that in time I would even stop noticing, the muffled conversations and laughter of the guards and inmates, the harsh clanging of the metal doors, the monotonous hum of the monstrous overhead fans, and the jangling keys of the guards as they made their rounds of the cell blocks. The impulse to scream out, to pound my fists against the steel cage, rose inside me, but eventually it passed. With my eyes tightly closed and my arms folded against my chest, I recited verse after verse of Scripture, as I had learned to do as a child in East St. Louis, until finally I fell asleep. That first night became the first full day, and then the weekend, the 4th of July weekend actually, and the lowest point of my life up to then. I tried to observe and learn the ways and rhythms of prison life. I marched in line with other prisoners to meals in the enormous cafeteria, where I kept my head down. I passed time in the day room, reading old magazines, or in my cell, listening to country music on the little radio with no tuning or volume knobs that was embedded in the wall. I wrote my first letter home to Barbara and another to Judge Perry, asking him to reconsider my motions for a new trial or a reduced sentence. I rolled cigarettes with the loose tobacco and papers the guard had given me, and tried to figure out how to light them, since new inmates were not allowed to have matches. I watched the guards, most of whom appeared to be Southerners of limited education, and tried to remember which ones wore the small tattoo of a flaming cross between their thumb and forefinger that signified membership in the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. For the most part, the new prisoners in the A&O unit hadn't been outside for days or weeks. We had no yard privileges until we appeared before the classification committee and received permanent cell and job assignments. Still, rumors spread through the cell block that because of the holiday and long weekend, the warden would allow us all some fresh air. Just after lunch on July 4th, the unit guard called, "Yard!" over the PA system, sending us all running to line up at the door. The yard was slightly larger than a football field and surrounded by high fences and razor wire. Metal bleachers overlooked a softball field, a running track, and a weightlifting and bodybuilding area, where some men had stripped to the waist and were working out. Like me, most of the men seemed happy just to sit or stand in the warm sun and breathe the clean summer air. I had found a quiet spot off the side of the bleachers when I heard a voice calling my name. "Hey, Abe! Hey, Abe! It's me, man! How are you doing?" I studied the pudgy round face of the white inmate walking toward me. I knew I had seen him before, but I couldn't match the face with a name. "Hey, man, it's me, Lonnie. We worked together at Ingersoll. Don't you remember me?" "Lonnie? Lonnie Bram?" I was surprised. "Yeah, man. I heard that you were here, but I didn't think that I would run into you." Lonnie had changed a lot since I had last seen him at Ingersoll. The well-muscled and energetic young man I remembered had put on weight and gone to flab. Lonnie and I had worked closely together to unionize Ingersoll, and he had even appointed me as a member of the negotiating team when it came time to hammer out a contract. Lonnie had disappeared without a warning, and rumor had him working for the union headquarters now. Now I could see that something worse may have caused his departure. Lonnie and I talked about our time at Ingersoll. "Man, they were going to make you a big boss if you had stayed there," he said. "They really liked you, especially the vice president. He told me that he wanted to talk you into becoming a supervisor." As I listened to Lonnie's bittersweet memories, I looked up and noticed 3 men walking toward us. I recognized the man in the middle, Joseph Spagnoli. One of the larger men flanking him, named Roy, had been convicted with Spagnoli in the counterfeit bond case. They sat down on the bleachers about 30 feet from us. Spagnoli still wore the same cocky smirk on his face that I remembered from the trial. "Do you know who that guy is, sitting in the center of those 2 inmates?" I asked Lonnie. "Yeah, I know him. That's Joseph Spagnoli, the guy that testified against you for the feds. Everybody here knows he's a stool pigeon, and nobody trusts him. He's on the plumbing detail." I could feel Spagnoli's eyes on me, but whenever I turned to look at him, he dropped his gaze to the ground. I could sense that he was afraid, even as he maintained that tough guy facade, but I resisted the urge to go over and start grilling him. Spagnoli was totally untrustworthy, and there would have been no way to believe anything he told me. Besides, he might have mistaken my intent if I approached, believing I wanted to hurt him. It was best for both of us if I just kept my distance. Lonnie said he was going to walk around a little before we had to go back inside, and asked me to join him. "I'm not afraid to be seen walking with you," he said, making me wonder if others were afraid. I took a pass on the walk and climbed down the bleachers, walking right past Spagnoli. Not a word was exchanged between us. Over the few days that followed, prison officials put me through a number of interviews and gave me thorough medical and dental examinations. On July 8th, they transported me to the prison camp. Tall trees and a manicured lawn surrounded the brown brick dormitory of the prison camp. The windows had neither bars nor any other security restraints. From the camp, you could see the heavy smokestacks and double-row fencing of the main prison. The camp had a completely different feeling than the bleak prison. They assigned me to a large room that I shared with 4 other prisoners, although it could have held more. There were communal bathrooms with enclosed showers and toilet stalls. The camp had a classroom in addition to its cafeteria and other common areas. There were even private rooms for prisoners on work release or whose sentences were almost complete. Of course, this was still prison, but we did not live surrounded by bars. Most of the inmates in the camp were nonviolent offenders, many near the end of their terms, and were allowed to move about freely and relax in the open air. 3 weeks passed before the mail finally came to me in prison. 4 letters, the first 2 of which were from Barbara, brought news of the world outside. Barbara had nothing but good news. She had told the children I was away teaching at a school. They were all doing well and missed me. The pastor at our church was writing to officials in Washington, hoping to win probation or parole for me. There was a form letter from the federal district court informing me that my letter to Judge Perry from prison asking for a reduction of sentence would be considered a motion before the court and so be docketed. Finally, a warm letter came from Ingersoll Products, affirming the company's belief in me. "We will help you in any way we can," the letter said. "After your release, we hope that you will resume your employment with our company." That gesture of support meant a great deal to me. Barbara even managed a visit toward the end of July. She looked wonderful and cheered me with news of the family and life in Chicago. The people at Ingersoll had stayed in touch with her and assured her that they would find work for her if ever she needed it, which eased some of our worry. Seeing her and being able to actually touch and hold her had a strange effect on me, reminding me of why I needed to stay strong and get home. But at the same time, I was reminded of how trapped I was in that miserable prison. My first assignment was to the grounds crew at the warden's home, tending to the lawns, hedges, and flower beds. I felt energized to be working outside, but the assignment itself got under my skin. I'd stand there with a rake or clippers in my hands and silently remember the generations of ancestors forced to work as slaves in the plantation fields of the South. It didn't help that standing in the center of one of the luscious green lawns was a statue, a little black lawn jockey with big red lips staring at me through huge, round, white eyes. The work started to eat away at me. Every time I jumped up onto the moving work truck, I thought about my running jumps onto the follow-up car behind the presidential limousine. I couldn't stop thinking that the hands that had once held those of President John Kennedy were now pulling weeds out of the ground at the master's house for $15 a month. The anger did me no good. Making trouble would just get me sent back to the main prison. I couldn't refuse the detail, but somehow I had to get a different assignment without losing my camp status. The warden at Terre Haute was particular about the appearance of his lawn and garden. We had strict instructions about how everything should look. The swaths left by the Moors had to be uniform in width, so that the overall effect was of a nice, neat pattern, and here I saw an opportunity. On a hot day in August, I started up a lawnmower and began to cut. Every time I turned to start a new row, I accidentally inched the mower a little bit to the side, so that none of the rows matched. When I was done, the lawn looked clean and freshly cut, but the pattern, if you cared as deeply about such things as the warden did, was random and sloppy. I heard a lot of talk around the camp that weekend about the warden being hopping mad over someone screwing up his lawn. It was even rumored that someone had been sent over to recut the grass and get it done properly. All I know for sure is that the following Monday, I was transferred from the warden's detail to the butcher shop. No one said anything to me about the lawn, but it struck me that the duty officers were keeping a very close eye on me. I'm sure that everyone considered the job on the killing floor of the butcher shop an enormous step down in status. The work was bloody, filthy, and dangerous, to be sure, but it pleased me that the work provided a service to the other prison inmates rather than our masters. I settled into a routine, doing my assigned work and keeping my head low, working to contest my conviction, and even finding a couple of inmates with whom I formed a three-piece band. Sometimes the duty officer let us perform during visiting hours. It was what they called good time. Early on a November morning in 1966, I was awakened by a guard poking me with a flashlight. "Bolden, get your belongings together and be downstairs at the front door in 15 minutes. I threw on some clothes and tossed whatever I could into a pillowcase. In the office, 2 men in suits were waiting for me. Only a few days before, Ray Smith had let me know that Judge Perry had denied our motion to reconsider the case, so it didn't seem likely they were taking me back to court. I figured that I was being transferred, but I had no idea where or why. The 2 men put me into their vehicle where a U.S. Deputy Marshal sign attached to the visor caught my eye. "Where are you taking me?" I asked as we left the Terre Haute prison behind us. "Didn't anybody tell you where you're going?" one of the deputies answered in a thick drawl. "No, they didn't." "Well, boy, we're taking you to a real penitentiary. You're going to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. Since you're an ex-government man, I know that you know about Fort Leavenworth." He let that news sink in for a moment before continuing. "Won't be like that farm you just left back there. You must have torn your ass pretty good to be transferred out of a place like that into a place like Leavenworth." I sat silent, rocked by the thought that I was going to Leavenworth, a maximum security prison. There was a prison camp there, but as far as I knew, it was only for military personnel. The drive to Leavenworth took us within sight of the great arch of the riverfront in St. Louis, and past East St. Louis, where I had spent my childhood. Each exit along the highway brought to mind familiar names and memories of streets, houses, and sandlot ball games. Farther down the highway, we passed Jefferson City, where I had gone to college, and many of the smaller towns in which our little college dance band had played. It was, literally, as if my life was passing before my eyes. I was dead to the free world. My dream was becoming reality. At first, the penitentiary at Leavenworth did not seem so different from Terre Haute, but as we drew nearer, it seemed to grow more immense, more forbidding, and more terrible. This was the Leavenworth I had heard so much about. Like everyone said, it was everything that a good policeman would hope for and the dread of those who had run afoul of the law. The intake officers ran me through the now familiar procedures and led me, as they had in Terre Haute, along cold corridors and steel walkways and up steel stairs. Leavenworth was built like a wheel, with each cell block representing a spoke, all of them meeting at a large central rotunda, like the great rotunda in the old Federal building in Chicago. Eventually, we came to cell 208, and as the barred door rolled shut behind me, I knew I had come to the end of this particular journey. Of the 5 bunks in the cell, the only one that didn't appear to be occupied was just a few feet from the toilet. Nobody answered when I asked if it was taken, so I cleared off the piles of old magazines and newspapers and got myself settled. I didn't need anyone to explain the general routine, and when chow time came, I fell in line like everyone else and marched into the cafeteria. My first meal in Leavenworth had an eerie similarity to the first one at Terre Haute. As I walked through the room with my food, looking for a seat, the murmur that had filled the room suddenly quieted. I looked around to make sure it wasn't my imagination, and saw many of the inmates staring at me. I didn't know if they treated every new prisoner this way or if they recognized me from the news reports, but I had no doubt that I was the main attraction that night. I felt very uneasy and was greatly relieved when the meal ended and I could return to my cell. But as we marched back, I heard a voice call out from one of the upper tiers of cells. "Abraham, we know you're down there, and we're going to get you. This is Crazy Joe out of New York. You put me in here, and now I'm going to get you." I couldn't see anything, or even tell exactly where the voice came from, but the threat unnerved me. I knew that I had been responsible for sending men to the penitentiary and that just being there was dangerous, but I didn't know anything about any Crazy Joe from New York. I ran through the possible cases or investigations that could have indirectly caused trouble for someone in New York. I had worked an undercover case in Buffalo, but nothing tied to that case came to mind. Exhausted from the trip and apprehensive about unseen dangers in Leavenworth, I kept to the cell when the guard allowed us to visit the day room later. I was sitting quietly at the table when one of my cellmates returned. As we were alone in the cell, I kept a cautious eye on the well-built black man. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked. "No, I don't." "I talked with you back in '61 in Chicago," he said. "You were with Mitch in the Robert Taylor Homes on 43rd and State. I talked to Mitch in his car, and you were sitting in the front seat next to him." "I don't remember anything about it, and I don't remember seeing you before," I insisted. "My name is Jimmy," he continued. "I'm out of Chicago, and I know a lot about you. I'm sure that it was you who was in the car when I talked to Mitch back in '61. Mitch would have been Illinois State Narcotics Agent Mitchell, and while there was no way I would have recognized Jimmy from a brief meeting 5 years in the past, he had his facts right about my being with Mitchell that night. We talked after that. Jimmy told me he was doing 10 years on a drug charge, and I surmised from what he told me about his relationship with Agent Mitchell that Jimmy had probably turned state's evidence at some point against some of his partners. Once a stoolie, always a stoolie, I thought. Jimmy had some useful things to say. "We heard a few weeks ago that the agent that was involved in the Kennedy murder was coming here. The rumor was circulating all over the yard. This is a dangerous place for you, and nobody that I talked to could understand why they would send you to a hellhole like this. I guess they want to teach me a lesson. I doubt it. You'll be out of here in a little while. They won't keep you around for long. It's too dangerous for you in this place. These guys kill each other over a pack of cigarettes. You'll never know when you're going to run into someone who knows you, just like you ran into me. I recognized you, but you didn't remember me. If I had wanted to do something to you, it would have been easy." I could tell Jimmy's warning was sincere. You should call your lawyer or your relatives or whoever you know that can help you get out of here." Jimmy clammed up when the rest of the men returned to the cell. Sure enough, I got my first hint of trouble the next day in the yard, where I found myself being approached by a group of 3 men. All 3 men wore prison blues, and one was noticeably smaller than the others, with streaks of gray in his hair and long sideburns. He took a few steps in front of me as if to block my path. "Hey, Abraham, remember me? I'm Crazy Joe, out of Buffalo, New York." My eyes went down to the 3 men's hands to see if any of them carried a weapon. "Now we're on even terms," Joe said. We eyeballed each other for a long moment, and I felt the rage boiling up inside me. I realized right there that I didn't care if I lived or died, but I wasn't about to be bullied by this weasel or any other convict. "Look, man," I shouted, getting right in his face. "I've never seen you, and I don't know you from Adam. Even if I did know you from somewhere, man, I was an agent doing my job. Like you said, we're in here together now. I'm a convict in this hellhole just like you. Both of us are trying to do this time. Now, if you have some grudge to settle, let's settle it right here, right now, because I'm not going around ducking you or anybody else while I'm locked up in here." Just then, one of the guards shouted over at us, "Hey, you men, move it along there, now!" Crazy Joe and his buddies moved off in a hurry, leaving me standing there, shaking with tension. I tried to calm myself and sort out whether blowing my top in that situation had been a good thing or a bad thing. Was I truly ready to kill or to be killed? The next thing I knew, there was a man at my side, a small black man with a little black tam on his head. He looked to be in his 40s, with smooth skin and clear eyes, and seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. "Come on," he said. "Let's take a walk." There was something gentle and kindly about this man, and I went along with him. "You handled that just right. I was watching the whole thing. Now, you watch yourself, because there are a lot of fools in here just like Joe." "Oh, you know Joe?" I asked, thinking I'd get some information. "I know almost everybody in here," he answered. "I've been locked up here for over 30 years, and probably will be here another 30 years more. I'm doing 365 years. He offered the last part almost casually. This guy didn't look old enough to have been locked up that long. I looked again at the tam, and it occurred to me that nobody I knew wore hats like that anymore. "You must have been a teenager when you came here," I said, trying to get his story out of him. "I was 40 years old when I came here. I'll be 70 years old my next birthday." "70?" I blurted out. "You must have really been taking care of yourself." He wasn't interested in that subject. "I heard that you were going to another place from here," he went on. "You got that one guy off your back, but there will be others who are going to hurt you because you were a cop outside. There are guys in here that just want to kill a cop, any cop. Everyone in here was sent here by a cop. Take my advice. Don't come back out into this yard again. If they decide to keep you here, ask them to put you in the camp outside of the walls. There are too many men out here that would think nothing of doing you in. It's too dangerous for you to be walking around out here. Stay around your cell inside until they move you out of here." I thanked this stranger profusely, and as he walked away, I asked, "What's your name?" "It doesn't matter," he said with a slight smile. "It doesn't matter." I watched him as he disappeared back into the prison. I took his advice to heart, and from that moment on, I stayed out of the yard and, except for meals, remained close to my cell.
It's a terrible shame about your horse coming in last and all. But I sure do love that winning horse of mine, though. I believe I owe that boy a great big sloppy kiss when I see him.
Why don't you give him some of your cigarettes instead?
Hey, Tyrell, you pulling for me duty this week? How's that horse of mine doing anyway?
Dead. Hadley busted his head up pretty good.
Doc had already gone home for the night. Poor bastard laid there till this morning. By then, hell, it wasn't nothing we could do.
What was his name?
What'd you say?
I was just wondering if anyone knew his name.
What the fuck do you care, new fish? Doesn't fucking matter what his name was. He's dead.
With Max with extensions, the Shawshank Redemption.
Crazy Joe out of New York. Crazy Joe. That's privileged black male right there. Now, we got at the unemployment office in Chicago with Fuller, we had Off the Wall. And now in Leavenworth, we got Crazy Joe from New York. Privileged black dudes. Katherine Massey Book Club, so that is first portion. We'll pick up chapter 17, very beginning. The number to dial 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. That last little snippet that we heard at the conclusion of chapter 16, that pretty much our only non-Chicago related sample snippet from the great, Mr. Fuller said, really one of the greatest prison movies of all time, if not the greatest, Shawshank Redemption, the great Morgan Freeman. But that scene when Mr. Bolden is talking at the end there, and he, gets this advice from another inmate. He says, man, this day they'll kill you here over a pack of cigarettes, or you looked at me funny, or you didn't look at me, or you stepped on my foot, or you got similar shoes, or, whatever. He said, man, don't mess around here. Stay in your cell, don't go out to the yard, and all the rest of it. He said, brother, what's your name? And it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. And he went on. I said, man, that right out of Shawshank Redemption. Brother gets beaten to death and killed, which easily could have happened to Abraham Bolden. You can die. That's one of the points Mr. Fuller would bring up all the time, that, hey, and that's the same time period. Ed Dufresne, he was in prison. He goes in 1947, and he's there for 20 years. So it would have overlapped. The film, Shawshank, would have overlapped with when Bolden was in greater confinement. And it's, hey, you could be killed here. Easily. And what's his name? It doesn't even matter. What is it? In fact, your name doesn't matter. You could be next. Hey, give me some cigarettes. Man. That the system, and particularly for someone classified as black. The person who got killed at the beginning of Shawshank Redemption was white. But, man, be classified as black in Illinois. Shawshank Redemption, as I said, that's our only non-Chicago related snippet. That's Maine, but still. Be a nigger in Illinois and you done acted up? Oh, my Lord, now we going to send you to federal penitentiary? Oh, man. They are really trying to do you in, Bolden, and I guess he knew to a degree as well. Any hoodles. Let's see. Oh, my goodness. I cannot say. I was able to take a teaspoon of time, and they have a plethora. And when I say plethora, I mean a plethora of articles in the Chicago Tribune, about the Bolden case, and you can see Spagnoli and Ed Hanrahan and his wife Barbara and Mr. Bolden together, like through and through all of this, and get more of the like day-to-day details that they covered about the trial and things that were happening, and his arrest, conviction, all the rest of it. It is fascinating, especially if you're in the Chicago area. Lots of Chicago history right in this case. Let's see, folks who dialed in, if you have commentary on the first portion of the reading, let's see. Retired firefighter in Florida should be with us. Let's see. If you have commentary, proceed.
Greetings, everyone. Basically, as I was listening, what Mr. Bolden was doing was just describing the transferring process that takes place, where you, I guess, the court or the state eventually decides on exactly where you're going to go. I recall the comforting support once again from his wife, attempted wife. I would imagine most inmates do not get that, but I would say that is something that was very helpful. Would be very helpful to get through such a tumultuous experience in itself. I think that helped him. Matter of fact, every reading he states something of that nature about that aspect of her assistance. Especially through the years that he spent in that condition. A white guy who knew him by name and so much about him, I first thing in my mind, I think it's not unusual, but it's suspicious, so I would have paid attention to what he said, but at the same time, I would keep a side eye to him as long as he was around. He spoke about claustrophobia, and claustrophobia is a very quiet but torturous punishment. It is used to torture people, and it's quite effective. It is quite effective. As a retired firefighter, you could find yourself in those type of environments, and it is not easy to overcome. I would, the best thing to do is to work to calm yourself down, and you may overcome it. I also was thinking about I'm trying to think of the founder of the Black Panther Party. I can't think of his name. He was tortured that way by solitary confinement is what it's called. But this particular compartment he was in, they nicknamed the Soul Breaker. I imagine most inmates don't get a job offer while in prison. He was mentioning about job offers that was offered to him while he was in prison, and from the inception of being in prison. And that's something that's quite unusual. But then again, he does have the background. I have here interesting his yard work. Oh yeah, his yard work in prison reminded him of chattel slavery. That tells me he was doing some counter-racist thinking, and because actually it is slavery. A lot of the correctional officers were from the South, and they were purposely recruited. A lot of them were purposely recruited to work in prisons to be, further torturous to the inmates, especially the black inmates, and also in law enforcement. I saw that from some history of LAPD. Inmates are not entitled to be informed of any important issues regarding their day-to-day life. He had that experience in this first reading. All of a sudden, 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody would shove a flashlight in your belly to wake you up and say, in a certain amount of time, let's go, be ready, that sort of thing. And so they're not entitled to be informed of anything when it comes down to it. I have here also, I can understand him not remembering most of the guys he arrested, because it's so many people that a law enforcement officer puts into custody. But they're going to remember you, that's for sure. Especially if it resulted with a prison sentence. It's not a very safe place to be in as far as a law enforcement officer in greater confinement, and he needed protection. He was warned by a inmate that was nice enough to kind of like give him some coaching. And I think law enforcement inmates today are somewhat protected. I'm not sure exactly how, but I have heard about it. I haven't talked to anybody that's had that experience, but from my understanding, that they are somewhat protected. And that's all I have for the first reading. Thank you.
Wacky. Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. That is a little, I don't know what to say, peculiar, I'll say. Like, you got a lot of niggers who got degrees and have never sold crack, never smoked crack, and didn't rape anybody, and graduated from school, can read, and they don't get a job offer. You got a nigger that's been convicted and in greater confinement. They say, oh, you got a job waiting for you. That is wild. Anyway, but as you see, he was in the Secret Service, so, I have heard of officers being protected if they are arrested, so they don't put them in general population. However, Gus T, about to get his counter-racist jurisprudence on for this year, I know of 2 cases where white people who are not enforcement officials, no badge, but they still do a little race soldiering, they are in protective custody in greater confinement. Peyton Gendron, in fact, the first time around when I was in Buffalo, went to the sentencing. Life in prison. This time it's the death penalty in the federal trial. But the first time around in the state trial, I got in my Uber, leaving the courthouse, and they said, oh, what are you here for, Brother Gus? And I said, oh, I was at the sentencing for Peyton Gendron. They said, oh, really? Peyton Gendron said, yeah, I remember all that. That was horrible. He shot up all the black people. And blah, blah, blah. He said, and I forgot the name of it. I have to look at the paper again. But he said, the facility where they're keeping him at, that's the facility where they normally keep, like, government snitches and informants, Magnoli type. That's where they normally keep them at. That's where they got old Peyton Gendron. That's where he's staying at. Now, they moved him now that he's got the federal trial for the death penalty. But Peyton Gendron won't know police officer. Why is he in special custody? Now, more recently, where Gus T going in Milwaukee late May? Race soldier, no badge, accused of killing and dismembering Sade C. Robinson. They still don't have her skull a year later. He got his own personal prison pod. I'd never even heard of such. I said, how many inmates are supposed to be in a pod? Is it 5 people, 10 people, 20 people? He has an entire pod to himself and just other guards, probably white. And 3 times. I think the same thing happened with the .22 caliber killer. They had to get, he wasn't no police officer either, but they had to get him in protective custody. We can't let the niggers get no vengeance on old Joey 22, and got to make sure that he's safe while he's in Buffalo. Crazy Joe can't lump up old Joey 22 now. That's 3 that I can think of. That we ain't even got to get to remember old fella got the hamburger, because they didn't. I don't know if he got protective custody. Old Dillon Roof, South Carolina, because that's old history. But he got a hamburger. That sounds kind of heading towards protective custody too. But man, if you are white, maybe that's all it needs. White means you get protective custody. Doesn't matter what you did, badge, no. White, protective custody. Shamika Harris should be with us as well. Let's see.
Evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak. In the audio segment, I noticed that, this is before session 1 played, and they said that Mr. Abraham Bolden spent 3 years in jail. So the lawyer's book said he was in jail for 4 years, and this text says 4 months shy of 6 years. I just wanted to note those inconsistencies about how much time he was in greater confinement. When he gets to jail, one of the prisoners asked him about Arthur Rachel, said Arthur Rachel was a cell block farm boss around there. And he said, you know Arthur Rachel, right? And he's like, yeah, I remember Art. And then, this person goes on to tell Mr. Bolden that Art said that the judge in his case, I guess this would be Judge Perry, got to the jury the night they found him guilty, and also that a deputy marshal went into the room and had conversations with the jurors about the verdict in the case. And, I was just thinking about how he was getting information from a prison. And he kind of said it. He said, sitting awake that night after lights out, I thought about the irony of finding sympathetic ears in prison after spending so many years in law enforcement. Let me see. He goes back to Perry's court, which he doesn't even know he's gonna where he's going until he gets there. And man, Judge Perry just being cold again. He said, Judge Perry was only too happy to remind Smith that George Howard's affidavit stating that Spagnoli and Jones had fixed up the case against me carried no weight at all. I just want you to know that you can just forget what Mr. Howard said in this case. I don't give any consideration to that affidavit, Judge Perry said. Probation, I will deny it. I have denied it, and I will, he added when Smith raised the subject. So, yeah, that dude just super cold. And then when his lawyer, Ray Smith, he said he changed tack, stating that the news had reported that I was being held in the Cook County Jail, which housed many people whom I had arrested and who might wish to do me harm. He pleaded that I be moved to a different county jail where my safety would not be jeopardized until I was transported to federal prison. Again, Judge Perry refused the request, arguing that the matter was outside his jurisdiction. Made me think of Donald Trump and that dude in the El Salvadorian prison. Say, I don't know what to do. He ain't here no more. I can't do nothing. Sorry. Let me see. So he gets to one jail, and this guard, he's kind of nice to him. He said, yeah, I recognized him, the older guard said, and he said he reminded him of his grandfather. They're about the same age, same small physique, medium dark complexion. But, he asked a question. He asked, has anyone been threatening you upstairs? And he's like, not really. And then he warns him to watch himself, says some of the people are real animals and will do anything to anybody. And then the guard asked if he had eaten dinner and arranged to have some food sent down. And he said he sat in his desk and swiveled his television set around so that he could see it. And I thought to myself, those things seem really small, but a guard being or speaking in this manner would make a big difference for a person in prison. Just him turning the TV around so Mr. Bolden could see it seemed like a gesture of kindness, for lack of a better term. And then later on, he's in the car with the other two law enforcement officers. They take off the cuffs so he can use the restroom and stuff. And he said, back in the car, I savored the coffee and sweet roll that two marshals had gotten for me. With the cuffs off, it seemed to me like the sun shone a little brighter and the air tasted a little fresher. I nursed this last taste of freedom as long as I could. And I just thought, how such well, it's not a small thing not to have your hands cuffed, but, to them, I don't know. It really matters to a prisoner. Then he gets to this next jail. He went through several facilities in this session. It's like kind of hard for me to keep track. But he gets to one of them, I guess, where he's supposed to officially be in custody. And they tell him, bend over and spread your cheeks. And he said, so began prison life with the introductory humiliation of a strip search. Next, I was fingerprinted, deloused, decontaminated, and showered before I could dress again, now in a standard issue one-piece white jumpsuit and clawed slippers. Finally, they hung a prisoner number 23663 over my neck and took my photograph. I was officially a prisoner in the federal system. And I thought it was just important to note that point at which Mr. Bolden is given a number instead of a name. It's kind of like he's less of a person, maybe. And when he gets in his cell, he said, the impulse to scream out, to pound my fists against the steel cage rose inside me, but eventually it passed. With my eyes tightly closed and my arms folded against my chest, I recited verse after verse of scripture, as I had learned to do as a child in East St. Louis, until finally I fell asleep. And I think that belief in white Jesus and the associated activity of so-called Christianity helps calm non-white people and enables us to better bear mistreatment. So, I kind of get why people do it, right? Like, number one, a lot of us don't even really think about it. It's what we've been trained to do, but I get how it feels so soothing, satisfying. You see. Again, with one of these small things, just like he said, like me, most of the men are happy just to sit or stand in the warm sun and breathe the clean summer air. Just these little bitty things that you don't get to have as a prisoner very often, they matter to him a lot. He also noted, he said, when he sees Spagnoli, right, he starts talking to the other dude that he used to work with. His name was Lonnie. And then Spagnoli comes out with some other guys, and he said they sat down on the bleachers about 6 feet from us. Spagnoli still wore the same cocky smirk on his face that I remembered from the trial. He had that look on his face on some of the photographs that were in the newspaper. I was noting the big differences in the places that he was. Like, one of them, seemed pretty nice as far as greater confinement goes. He said, he called it a camp, and he said it had a different feeling than the bleak prison. They assigned him to a large room that he shared with 4 other prisoners, although it could have held more, so not as crowded. It had communal bathrooms with enclosed showers and toilet stalls. That's nicer, because in the other ones he just had like a toilet fountain type of thing. There was a classroom and just all these other things make a big difference. I did note a retired firefighter said how he was not pleased doing that yard work for the white man, and he had one of those lawn jockeys with the big red lips. I was wondering if he was actually going to be sent away from that prison or if he was punished for messing up their guy's yard and that's why he left, because, I don't know. I couldn't tell by reading the text if that's why they sent him away, because he messed up the yard. Let's see. I think that's all I have for right now, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Really might have been both with the lawn, like in terms of we got to send you to Leavenworth or the worst prison we can find. We were going to do this. Maybe we were going to do this anyway, or maybe we had thought of it, but then now you done messed up my lawn. Like, oh yeah, this nigger is for sure gone. Like if it was any doubt, or we were going to think on it, like decision made, or maybe we were going to give him a month or two. What? Oh no, he's going tomorrow. Yeah. What did he say? 4 in the morning. Go get messed up my lawn. That was a good catch as well, these discrepancies about how long he actually was in greater confinement. I guess we could look at the newspaper if we, trust that source to see when he was released and or see what he says when we get to the end of the book in terms of how many years. But that is noteworthy, I guess, that there seem to be so many dates for, again, like I said, don't keep trimming numbers off. If I was in prison for 6 years, don't be trimming it down saying 3, 4, 5.5, 5 3/4. If I was there for 6 years, 6 years. And I think also, in fact, equally important, Miss Harris, she said that it was kind of confusing because he was moved to so many different facilities and ended up, at this Leavenworth, I think the last one, where they said, oh, we're going to get you now for sure. That is deliberate, and I suspect Barbara and his mother and other attempted family, it would be disorienting to them as well. And I've heard this before, where black people in greater confinement, you get, woke up 4 o'clock in the morning, as she said, jabbed with a flashlight, get up, and maybe they drive you to the other side of the state. Maybe he said, maybe they take you out of state. Who knows? 6-hour drive, that type of a thing. Family, what? He's where? What? Kansas? When? That sort of thing. Maybe they got transportation. They can get out of state, drive 6 hours. Maybe that's round trip 12 hours. Take a whole weekend to come see you. Maybe they can't. Designed to be disorienting for both the prisoner and his attempted family. All of that breaking connection. That's what they do with the slaves, see? Let's see. *61, other folks, they have commentary to share until justice@gmail.com if you have email commentary. Let's see. Get in one email as we proceed. Email number 1. I think one of the major themes of this text is workplace racism, for sure. Racist jokes, lack of training with the firearms. Non-white coworkers are not your allies. The Voltron effect, racial showcasing. Agent Conrad Cross, he's the good black. And codification of suspected racists. President Biden pardoned Mr. Bolden in 2022. We'll hear about that later. Obviously not Mr. Obama. Chapter 15. Art said the judge in your case got to the jury the night before they found you guilty. Spagnoli was a personal friend of one of the guys that was serving on your jury. Spagnoli and this juror on your trial pulled off a burglary together, but nobody said anything so that this guy could stay on your jury. Racist white supremacists are so thorough. This is what power domination looks like. Even imagine that, like the person on the jury, you're a criminal. They say a jury of your peers, this guy's a criminal. Who is this person on the jury? And even, was this person on the jury with Anna B. Hightower the first time around? Or this was a white dude on the jury that convicted, I guess. But he's sitting up there, and he's got to be looking at this like, oh, there goes old Spagnoli. We robbed the bank together. We have to kick it. We'll go over the loot that we got and see what he want me to. You want me to be supposed to get this nigger? Okay, we get this nigger. You didn't. Never mind. We got it. Guilty. He for sure did it. For sure. You think we can hit another bank? Maybe after we get the. Come on. Let's see. When they brought me back to the county jail, one of the guards took me down to a basement cell, 4 block. 4 cells. Sat separated and secluded from the rest. This is what they call death row. The guard told me. Psychological torture. Absolutely. Let's see. 3. I watched the news. Reports about my hearing about Judge Perry denying probation as well as the motion to move to a safer location. The station ran an editorial deriding the government and the Secret Service of their harsh treatment of Agent Bolden. I suspect a lot of the racist white supremacists knew Bolden was innocent. They were just remaining on code. I told you, Mae Brussell talked about the Bolden case way back, during this time period, and it was all over the Chicago Tribune, other news outlets, the black press covered Mr. Bolden's case, and New York Times, even out here in Seattle, it was in the local papers. So lots of white people knew about the Abraham Bolden case like decades ago. And lots of white people probably knew, because he said the drinking was widespread and well known. So I'm sure probably some white people knew, oh yeah, Bolden ain't told no lie there. I didn't see they get out there and get that tequila and woo. Let's see. Chapter 16. Bend over, spread your cheeks, said the intake Delectable Negro. Human Consumption and Homoeroticism Within U.S. Slave Culture by Vincent Woodard. That scene is also depicted at the very beginning of Shawshank Redemption and probably many other prison films. 2. Scan the faces of the trustees and other prisoners. The trustee system, used in U.S. prisons since the 1800s, designated certain inmates to have privileges, abilities, responsibilities not given to other inmates. Some were given firearms. Parchment Farm in Mississippi. The system supposedly ended in the 1980s after litigation. Maybe. 3. I watched the guards, most of them whom appeared to be Southerners of limited education, and tried to remember which ones wore the small tattoo of a flaming cross between their thumb and forefinger that signified membership in the KKK. Racial narrowing, perhaps? Would your treatment have been any different if you were incarcerated in Attica or Sing Sing in New York State? Facts. This is getting close to the time of Attica rebellions and such. 4. Yeah, I know him. That's Joseph Spagnoli, the guy that testified against you for the feds. Everybody here knows he's a stool pigeon, and nobody trusts him. He's on the plumbing detail. Was Mr. Bolden sent here so Spagnoli could kill him either by his own hands or by proxy at the behest of Chicago PD, FBI, CIA? That's what I said. Like, that is so common, so easy to be killed in prison. It's nothing. Like he said, you get killed over a cigarette in prison. That's in Shawshank Redemption. You get killed for nothing. You were talking too loud, or we just whatever. We didn't like you. Who is we? Anybody. The warden, the guard, another inmate, anybody. Why didn't you like him? He looked at me funny. He stepped on my shoe. He took my cigarette. Whatever. Oh, he threatened to snitch on us. Any reason. So, and uppity nigger, so we don't even need a 5. My first assignment was to the grounds crew at the warden's home. Remember the generations of ancestors forced to work as slaves in the plantation fields of the South. Warden, being hopping mad, transferred from the warden's detail to the butcher shop. Work was bloody, filthy, and dangerous to be sure. Chicago has a long history of butchers, right, and messing up the whole river and environmental system, throwing out all the leavings and excess from the cattle that have been slaughtered and all that. Dangerous to be sure, but it pleased me that the work provided a service to the other prison inmates rather than our masters. Victims guaranteed qualified. You are still working for Massa, Mr. Bolden, either directly or indirectly. That's sad. Facts. I'm sure the inmates got the chitlins of whatever was being butchered, and yeah, master got the choice prime rib. I guess if they were doing cattle or whatever, they're gonna get all the prime rib, and juicy tenderloin and steaks. Give them niggers the oxtails, or And he said safety like training. My God, can you imagine what, how they did all that cutting and such, and how many folks lost a finger or worse? And that's what I mean. That's another one. Easy to kill somebody. Now, what sort of supervision do you have in that environment? How easy is it to access, I don't know, a meat cleaver? And then, Crazy Joe from New York. So, whoa, Bo, remember I told you I was going to get it. Whoops, we had an accident out there in the slaughter room today, and Bolden, he just ain't make it. Oh, well. Who'd be upset? Number 6. Well, boy, you're going to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. You must have torn your ass. Pretty good. I love that phrasing. Like, woo, you must have torn your ass. Like, what does that even mean? I'm sorry. Continue. Delectable Negro, human consumption, and homoeroticism within U.S. slave culture. And I've heard that phrase like a number of, like not just once or twice, like many times. You done torn your ass now. What? And I've been in prison. Like, what did I do? I've been chilling. I don't even leave myself. I ain't turning down. Man, I thanked this stranger profusely as he walked away. I asked, what's your name? It doesn't matter. He said with a slight smile, it doesn't matter. I watched him as he disappeared back into the prison. I took his advice to heart. From that moment, I stayed out of the yard, except for meals, remained close to my cell, providing assistance in the workplace to non-white victims if it does not place you in jeopardy. If it does not place you in jeopardy. Should be a part of our code. Can be risky at times, I will admit. Let's see. Much of them will stop there. Didn't get any further. Let's see. Star 6-1 to other folks if they have observations, commentary for what we've read thus far. Let me see if I can go back and nab a few notes before we get to chapter 17. Let's see. So we get to the... All right, so he gets locked up, going into prison, not getting this, or I guess he did kind of get the quasi stop for a Whopper because they got him the cinnamon rolls and kind of took off the handcuffs. So I mean, hey, now he was a former officer, so I guess she's supposed to get the thin blue wall hookup. What you call it? Dylan Roof. He was just a no count race soldier, and he still got the hookup. Let's see. I'm still kind of. The white fella on the jury, if you pull off a burglary, does that disqualify you from jury duty? You still get to go hang out on the jury if you rob the jewelry store? I can't even get it together. Maybe they didn't get caught. Maybe that's it. They didn't get caught. So, hey, what do you mean, Rother? What do you mean? We didn't do no. Gee. Let's see. While the jury was in the room, the deputy marshal went into the room and had conversations with the jurors about the verdict in your case. Now, today, we got cameras everywhere, so maybe at least you could have, video of all of this. But, I mean, this is kind of what we said. We kind of knew this already. I think Bolden even knew this already. He was saying this immediately when his attorney was like, calm down, Bolden. You're acting crazy, and he can't do that. And then I think he did kind of say, George Howard at the end, like, hey, this is a white federal judge, and he can do what he wants. I mean, what are we going to do? I'm going to the bottom. It's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? But, I mean, Bolden seemed to know immediately that this is exactly what was happening. Like, come on. You got to go in there and bribe. Now, even with all that, so you got Plants on the jury out there sitting there. I got you, Spags. Don't worry about it. Got you guilty. And with all that, you still got to go cheat and get people to go in there. Now, come on, y'all. What is it? Who is holding out? We don't even have no nigger woman to blame this time. Get it together. Who is saying that this nigger is innocent? We'll punish a white man. You saying what we did? We'll punish a white man. Guilty? Are we guilty? Okay, then. Let's go. Acting crazy. Are you serious? And then they'll tell you, Orenthal James is guilty. Right, Jeff Tubin. Yes, yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I thought this was important, too. Now, they said the organized crime division of the Chicago Police connected both men to low-level mafia, talking about Arthur, Rachel, and old Spags. They were affiliated with low-level mafia affiliate Vito Zaccanzini, who was caught cashing the nearly perfect $100 counterfeit bonds, and who in turn had ties to San De Stefano. The way we understood things, De Stefano was allegedly a territory boss for the well-known mobster Sam Giancani. After President John Kennedy was assassinated, Giancana was mentioned by several conspiracy investigators of having some part in an attempt by the U.S. government to assassinate Fidel Castro, president of Cuba. They talked about this extensively in some of the more released files that have come out. The near perfect quality of the counterfeit bonds that had been cashed suggested to the Secret Service that organized crime had a hand in the counterfeiting operation. That I thought was so important for so many reasons, even the nearly perfect $100 counterfeit bonds. How exactly would you accomplish these nearly perfect replicas? And this is the second time, that's why it really stood out to me. This is the second time that we've heard about perfect replicas of government printing. I said, wow, maybe the same people that were able to get these perfect replicas of Secret Service identification badges to assassinate the president, maybe those same people also have access to perfect replicas of printing presses, or even we can access the exact printing presses, so we can make perfect replicas. And I said, oh man, I'm talking crazy. Then I said, whoa. It's the same bureau that does both. Fuller, one more time, the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. And if this is organized crime, ain't no more organized than the federal government. So would they be both? And matter of fact, that's a whole lot of what the Kennedy assassination thing is, the link between the federal government and so-called organized crime, that this is one and the same. That's what I said at the beginning of this book, when they keep saying these so-called factions to kill Kennedy, that you got the right-wing racist, the crime boss racist, and then a government secret wing within the government racist. That's all one and the same. Racists. Anyway, but that Bing super highlight. That's why I said I would have so many more questions to ask Fuller. Like, now, what did you see? Do you the same thing I said before? Did you see any evidence that the white people who worked there, not you, of course, Fuller, I know you're not going to be able to steal a rubber band, but do you think it would be possible, any of the white people that you worked with, really powerful, they could get access to replicate Secret Service badge, your security badge? In fact, if they wanted to make a fake one, would it have been possible? Would there have been white people there powerful enough they could have done that? Or replicate some cash if they wanted to. Liquidate. Fuller even talked about this. Forget that. Liberate a whole printing press. Then that's how you get perfect counterfeit replicas. We got the exact same equipment that the federal government uses. Anyway, let's see. He's going to be strong for Deborah. That's great. I can't even imagine her being a single black mom. He's gone, working at Nabisco, Red Dye 40, and Chips Ahoy, and all the West vanilla wafers. And she said, nothing's going to break this family up. I thought of like Minister Malcolm X and Devontae, Abigail. That's what I thought. Sierra, that's what I thought. We were once a family. Like, please. One black person, male or female, and your so-called children, you are no match for one white female social worker. Richard Williams, Black and White the Way I See It. Remember, he got that in King Richard. They got that scene. You get that one white social worker. Does she have a couple enforcement officers just in case you get rowdy, come up and what's going on here? Barbara, looks like you're struggling. Where's Mr. Bolden? Oh, he's locked up. You got this no-count thug as a husband. Even thinking that that could happen, which I'm sure had to cross Barbara's mind once or twice or 20 times during all of this. Yikes. That does take a toll, and I do not have parents, but it would be on my mind a lot. Let's see. The Confidant, did you have commentary? Should be with us as well. Let's see if the audio is cooperating. Oh, look at that.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Gus. only a few comments. You guys have really made a lot of wonderful comments, and some of them I wanted to talk about, but since they've already been covered for the most part, I'm going to just go on with the few that I have. I was looking at the part where the work started to eat away at me every time I jumped up. First of all, let me just say this to preface my comment, is that I agree with his sense about being on a plantation and doing what our ancestors did for slave labor. And I identified somewhat with his feelings on it, and the slaves, etc. Then the work started to eat away at me every time I jumped up onto the moving work truck. I thought about my running jumps onto the follow-up presidential limousine. I couldn't stop thinking that the hands that had once held those of President John Kennedy were now pulling weeds out of the ground at the master's house for $15 a month. The anger, here's my point, the anger did me no good. My sense of that point is that sometimes we don't do ourselves any good in terms of we don't have benefits of great options. I think I'm going to say that I would have preferred being out in sunshine, in the lawn and nature, etc., as opposed to being in the cutting guts and blood and whatever else in the animal, let's see, what was it called? In the butcher area. But then again, that's probably a personal choice or sense of what might be a choice. So the anger did me no good. I would say for most of us that we have to not allow our emotions to get away with us when we have what might appear to be not the best of options, but one preferable to the other, based on things we can't control. So controlling our emotions, I think, in the system is quite important. See if I had anything else. I have this last one. I settled into a routine. This is still in chapter 16, I think. I settled into a routine doing my assigned work and keeping my head low, working to contest my conviction, and even finding a couple of inmates with whom I formed a three-piece band. So there was some way for him to release the anger and tension and stress while he was in the first facility, the greater confinement area. It was what they called good time. I was a little bit confused by that. It was what they called good time. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I thought about the sitcom Good Times for some reason. Anyway, I think that would have probably served him a little bit better than going to Leavenworth or the other greater confinement location, being able to practice his love of music, etc., rather than being moved. The other thing was, I think what I'm really trying to say is that in the system of racism, white supremacy, where we don't have great options on the plantation, we probably, if we don't let our emotions, our anger, our frustrations get away entirely, that we may be able to do ourselves a little bit of relief from the system as compared to what some of the other options might be. The final comment is the person that he spoke to on the prison yard who said that he he said that stay as near to your cell as you can, because you're in danger. And he asked him what his name was, and as I think Gus mentioned, he said it doesn't matter, etc. and so on. It's almost as you're entertaining angels unaware. Sometimes in the system of white supremacy, you get a break. Somebody shows up and gives you some spiritual relief from the system. And so I consider this just entertaining angels unaware, someone able to help relieve some of the pressure of the system of white supremacy by giving you some help, some information that just might benefit you. I'll close my comments there. Thank you for letting me speak.
Much obliged, the confidant. We will get to audio segment 2 probably just as well. I didn't know if I was going to have to use my mute button if she's about to say something blasphemous about the great Jimmy Walker and the great ancestor Esther Roll and great ancestor John Amos, because I surely will do some name calling and move some furniture. You get to talking bad. They told me that is Negro culture at its finest. That's what they said. It's Negro culture at its finest, and that's Chicago history. Good times. Good times. So, yeah, we can't have no blasphemy talking bad about that. So we'll leave it there, and maybe we'll talk to the confidant again. Maybe not, if she's going to be talking wild today. Audio segment number 2, chapter 17. See if Mr. Bolden survives Leavenworth. I guess he did if he wrote the book, but we shall see. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy, audio segment 2.
Chapter 17. The kindly lifer at Leavenworth had been right. On a gray and rainy November day, less than a week after I arrived, I found myself sitting in handcuffs and leg irons on a bus with barred windows, pulling away from that infamous prison. Again, nobody ever told me where I was going, but from the routes we were taking and the chatter of the other prisoners on the bus, I guessed our destination: Springfield Medical Center for Federal Prisoners. The move didn't surprise me in the least. I knew well what the government had in store for me. I'd seen how they dealt with other personnel who dared to speak out on sensitive subjects. As I understood it, the government could declare that I was mentally imbalanced or unstable or insane or whatever term they chose to use, at which point the actual length of my sentence no longer mattered. They could keep me in treatment until such time as their doctors decided I was cured. Then I would be ready to continue serving the sentence of the court. None of the time spent in psychiatric care would count toward the completion of my sentence. I understood that I was facing a whole new kind of peril, and more than ever, I needed to keep my wits about me. Intake and processing were by now routine, and I went through it all passively. It wasn't until I got to my cell that I realized how different things had become. I was to be alone, in a tiny windowless cell, about 7 by 8 feet, with nothing but a bench, a washbowl, and a toilet. The door was solid steel, with a tiny viewing window at eye level and a long, narrow slot through which they could pass a food tray. The door clanged shut for the first time, and I peered through the window, but could see nothing but another cell door and some blank wall. I could see no other human being. Suddenly, I felt myself beginning to sweat, and I felt weak. I lay down on the bunk and rested my head on the thin pillow as a wave of nausea swept over me. This was it, the realization of the dream I had when I was 13. A rectangular steel vault with a tiny glass window, me on the inside, and a woman standing with 3 children on the outside. No escape. I felt as if I were standing face to face with living death. Holding my body rigid, with my arms folded across my chest, I closed my eyes and started to pray, hoping to drive away the terrible vision and fight back the tears I felt gathering inside me. The crisis passed for a while, but I knew there would be more to come. A guard brought me a meal, which I welcomed, and gave me paper and pencil and envelopes when I asked. I spent my first night writing letters to the outside world. I spent several days in that cell, in virtual isolation except for an hour of walking every day, a few trips to the guard station to fill out paperwork, and a shower. My restlessness was growing into desperation until one day when I was escorted into a room where 3 middle-aged white men in suits sat at a long mahogany table. This was a hearing to classify me and determine my permanent status. "Mr. Bolden," one of the men began, introducing himself as my caseworker, "I see that following a plea of not guilty, you were tried and found guilty of crimes that you are alleged to have committed during your duties as an agent of the federal government. You have been sentenced to a term of 6 years in the custody of the U.S. Attorney General. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "I also see from the summary that you appealed your case through the courts in Chicago and all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. Is that correct?" "That is correct, sir." "Your case was recently heard before the sentencing judge in Chicago in, let's see, October, I believe it says here. Your motion for a reduction of your sentence or retrial of the case was denied. Is that correct?" I affirmed that all the contents of the file were correct, and he asked if I had concluded all the court action in my case. "No," I answered. A prisoner at Springfield could be classified in 4 different ways. He might be there for medical reasons, or for psychiatric problems, or because he was too difficult to handle at other federal prisons and needed to be held under maximum security conditions. The last classification was prison camp status. No reason was given in my case. I was simply sent there. I was allowed to gather up my few things from that claustrophobic little holding cell, and was escorted through a maze of corridors and passageways to a large central room surrounded by smaller dormitory rooms. At the center stood a guard station, an enclosure made of heavy steel with wire-reinforced glass windows. It was mid-November, and although I was relieved to be there and not in that terrifying isolation cell, I was taken aback by the stark contrast with the airy camp at Terre Haute in midsummer. The camp here was darker and bleaker, with grates over the windows to remind us where we were. Still, I breathed easier, and was cheered by the sight of the Holy Bible on my bunk, apparently left by the previous occupant. I had been at the camp for less than a month, working an easy job at the officers' mess, when Barbara came to visit for the first time. She had finished her shift at Nabisco, and then ridden all night on a bus in order to be in Springfield by 8:30 in the morning. It pained me terribly for her to see me in this prison so far from home, reminding me that I had not measured up, not become the husband she deserved. "Don't believe anything they tell you about me from here," I began. I needed Barbara to understand Springfield represented a life-and-death situation for me. "If they say something has happened to me, contact Attorney John Hosmer and come here as soon as you can." I had been unable to reach John Hosmer, whom I had asked to represent me if I was ever sent to Springfield, so Ray Smith was still listed in the prison files as my lawyer. As emotionally draining as it was for me to see my wife, I spent a lot of our visit telling her about the dangers there and the different ways I thought the government would try to break me. And then she was gone. I settled fairly quickly into a routine at Springfield. I had learned a thing or two about how to do time. I got involved in drafting and public speaking classes available there, and spent time in the library doing legal research in preparation for filing a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. More important, I made some real friends. Every day, I walked in the yard with Elijah, with whom I would discuss spirituality and religion. As a member of the Israelites, African Americans who claimed a historical Jewish heritage, Elijah had a perspective on the world that was new to me. A few bunks down from me in the dormitory, I found Exendine, a Native American from Oklahoma, sitting cross-legged on his bunk, reading the Holy Bible. We struck up a conversation and became fast friends. Exendine would tell me how much his people loved John Kennedy. As an Indian, he could empathize completely with the civil rights movement and the struggle of black Americans, but he never fully accepted the idea of nonviolent protest. After all, the blue-eyed devil, as he referred to all European inhabitants in America, had taken away the lands of his people through years of bloodshed. And finally, there was Gus, whose bunk was next to mine. A former boxing promoter who admittedly had been mixed up with underworld characters, Gus had plenty of his own troubles with the government, but it turned out that he had followed my case so closely that he had a scrapbook of clippings about me from the papers in Cincinnati, his hometown. He never imagined that he'd actually meet me. Gus warned me about life at Springfield. "This is a bad place to be in," he would say. "This is hell." He told me about an inmate who simply disappeared from the camp dormitory one night. "The next time I saw him in the hallway," Gus told me, "the guy was so doped up that he didn't know me. Watch out for these people. They don't care about anybody around here." Barbara brought the children to visit me around the New Year's holiday, and a week or two later my mother came, along with my younger sister. The moment Mom saw me when I walked into the visitor's room, she burst into tears. My innocence or guilt didn't matter to her. I had brought shame to us all, and my confinement was taking a toll on her. Seeing her devastation, I grew even more determined to get back into court and challenge my conviction. I had to protect myself from any sudden disappearances while at Springfield, and I had to get Hosmer up to speed. In the years just after that terrible day in Dallas, the American public became increasingly obsessed with the circumstances of Kennedy's assassination. For many people, the release of the Warren Commission report in 1964 failed to settle any questions, and even raised some new ones. Conspiracy theorists published countless books and articles speculating on the unseen forces behind the crime. 3 of those books mentioned my treatment at the hands of the government when I became a potential witness. One of these was Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment, which challenged the Commission's finding that Oswald had acted alone, and went on to become a bestseller. Lane detailed how the Secret Service had tricked me into returning to Chicago from Washington and what had followed, based on interviews he had conducted with me secretly while I was appealing my case to the U.S. Supreme Court. At the time, I had shared with him my fears of how the government might try to deal with me once I was incarcerated. In early 1967, Mark Lane happened to call my home while visiting Chicago and learned that I was being held in Springfield. Lane was no novice, and knowing what Springfield might mean for me, he called a news conference in which he announced where I was being held, and described his fear that the government might try to silence me further by declaring me insane. Mark Lane's statements were broadcast widely. About a week later, John Hosmer showed up at Springfield Medical Center with a man he introduced as Mr. Burt. Hosmer looked nothing like what I had imagined. He was an older man and very tall, with unkempt gray hair, and wore a black patch over one eye. Mark Lane's appearances on television had reminded Hosmer that he was to act as my attorney if the government sent me to the Springfield Medical Center. The other man, Burt, turned out to be a young lawyer from Jim Garrison's office in New Orleans. Garrison, the district attorney there, fervently believed that the Warren Commission had been methodically deceived by a malicious conspiracy hatched by agents and officers operating within and on behalf of the government. Convinced that Oswald had not acted alone and that the government was conspiring to cover up evidence of a plot to assassinate the President of the United States, Garrison had launched his own investigation. Hosmer had contacted Garrison about my case, and this young lawyer seemed to be well acquainted with my predicament. I gave the 2 men a detailed account of everything that had happened to me up to that point, and then expressed my main fear, that the prison officials would try to classify me as a psychiatric patient in order to discredit me. This would undermine any future testimony I might give about the Secret Service's failure to protect the President. I needed people on the outside to be aware of my physical and mental status at all times, and to be prepared to mount an immediate legal challenge if the government attempted to reclassify me as an inmate undergoing psychiatric treatment for any reason. Hosmer and Burt held a news conference of their own after our visit. Burt mentioned me by name and stated boldly that, Bolden's imprisonment inside the medical center is very suspicious in light of Bolden's charges against the Secret Service. At Springfield, we were able to see the reports of the conference on the day room television, and I became something of a celebrity within the prison. Rather than shunning me as an ex-agent of the government, inmates sought me out to hear about my experience in the White House and ask what it was like to work next to President Kennedy. A few realized that I had some knowledge of the law and enlisted my help with paperwork and letter writing in their court cases. In 3 cases, I actually helped a few inmates get their sentences reduced to time served. Around that time, in 1967, William Manchester's book, The Death of a President, joined the growing body of literature that challenged the findings of the Warren Commission. Manchester made much more than some previous authors about the Secret Service's inadequate protection of Kennedy. When James Rowley, the chief of the Secret Service, testified before Congress and refused to answer any questions about the reportedly outlandish conduct of the agents in Dallas, one congressman angrily upbraided him, saying that his attitude was strange in light of statements in William Manchester's book about the drinking and late-night partying on the night before the assassination. Rowley deflected the questions by saying that the agent who had made those accusations was in prison for other crimes, but the congressman wasn't buying it and forced Rowley to promise that the Secret Service would issue a white paper explaining their side of the issue. All of this received plenty of attention from the news media, and so prison officials clamped down on me right away at Springfield. My caseworker accused me of misusing my visiting privileges by contacting authors and lawyers who were writing articles and books that put the government in a bad light. I hadn't written or contacted anyone in Jim Garrison's office or anyone else who was trying to embarrass the government, and I told them so. Nonetheless, they limited my visitors from then on to family members and John Hosmer, now my attorney of record. Indeed, my family did come and visit in April 1967. It had been nearly a year since my children and I had seen one another. They were growing so fast, both physically and mentally, and I felt sure that my 10-year-old daughter and my 8-year-old son had figured out that the bars on the windows and the uniformed guards meant something, and that maybe I wasn't away teaching, as they had been led to believe. I can't describe how much I wanted to get up and walk out of the prison with their little hands in mine, but that was not to be. It was long after the family's visit that I saw a story on the evening news about my case. Former Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden has filed a writ in court charging the government with soliciting perjured testimony and other illegal activity used to convict Bolden and sentence him to prison, said the correspondent. John Hosmer appeared in the story, reiterating that my conviction and confinement at Springfield had been engineered to silence my criticism of the Secret Service. My friend Elijah found me in the yard later and spoke sternly to me. "That guy is just using you to fill his pockets," he said, referring to Hosmer. "He wants you to think that he cares about you, but when push comes to shove, he wouldn't do one day of your time for you. You have to reach into yourself and find that power that God gave us. It's inside of you." Elijah's voice rose, either in anger or in inspiration. "It is you who are standing in the way of your own destiny. You have the inner power, and that's what they are afraid of." That same night, a guard came and found me at my bunk. "Come with me, Bolden." I reached toward my cabinet, but he quickly stopped me. "Don't worry about bringing anything. We can take care of that later. We will bring you anything that you need from here." I followed the guard through the prison until we arrived at what was obviously a hospital floor, with male and female nurses and attendants hustling about the spotless corridor. I was placed in a small hospital room, bare except for a bed and some medical equipment attached to the wall. "Where are we?" "You are in Section 1-2A, one of the guards explained. "You were sent here by order of the Associate Warden." The guard informed me that the warden had ordered me confined there for my own safety until further notice. I wasn't fooled in the least by the hospital surroundings. I was in the hole, receiving punishment as if I had violated prison rules. There was no evidence anywhere of any threat to my safety within the prison. I could not leave the room except to use the bathroom, and even then I needed a guard to escort me. Walking the hallways was forbidden, as was going out into the yard. The door of my room remained locked at all times. Even my meals were brought to me there. On the second day of this confinement, I asked to see the warden, but was told I had to start at the bottom of the chain of command, which meant speaking to Sergeant Ennis. I complained to Ennis that I was being held in virtual isolation and wanted to return to the camp dormitory. Sergeant Ennis didn't try to cover up the truth, and told me straight out that the order to segregate me resulted from all the publicity about your connection to the Kennedy thing. He added that nothing could be done about the isolation until some decision was made by the administration regarding my status at the medical center. The conversation with Sergeant Ennis motivated me to write to Judge William Collinson, who was handling my petition for a writ of habeas corpus in the Springfield District Court. In my letter, I provided the judge with a detailed account of how I had been sent into isolation after the publicity about my filing the petition, and how prison personnel had acknowledged to me that my involvement in the Kennedy thing was to blame. In June, Judge Collison took under consideration the motion for a writ. In his decision, December 18, 1967, he noted that he was unable to overturn a conviction that has been upheld by the other courts that the plaintiff has petitioned. Although the case is out of the ordinary, the petition must raise substantial constitutional issues that have not been litigated elsewhere in order to overturn your conviction. Plaintiff has presented enough evidence for this court to question whether or not you should have been convicted by a jury, but plaintiff has failed to present the kind of new evidence that would be necessary for this court to rule against the government's motion for a summary judgment. Said petition should be filed in the U.S. District Court in Chicago, and that the U.S. District Court in Springfield, Missouri, could take no action on his complaint. The judge concluded. I don't know why I thought anything different might happen, but I had let myself get my hopes up. The judge's decision devastated me. When I got back to prison, I found out that for some reason they had decided to send me back to the camp. After a week spent in almost total isolation and the crushing disappointment of the judge's denial of my petition, going back to the camp felt wonderful, as if I had been let out on parole. Funny how the mind works. Life back at the camp didn't remain peaceful for very long. A few weeks after I had returned, I witnessed the murder of one inmate at the hands of another. I had gone from the officers' mess in the basement to the main cafeteria to deliver some food. An inmate I had never seen before was standing at the back of the elevator when I got on to return downstairs. When the doors opened again at the basement, another inmate rushed past me in a blur. He threw himself on the young man standing in the elevator, stabbing him repeatedly in the belly. The screams, the blood, the terror in both men's eyes, these were horrible things to see, and the images will never leave me. I walked away as the doors of the elevator closed with the two men inside. I was trembling at the thought that I could have been killed as well. Word got around about what had happened, but I never said a word to anyone about what I'd seen. The next confrontation involved me directly and had serious ramifications. One day, a burly young inmate with sandy hair named Kenny came to work in the kitchen. The rumor around the prison was that Kenny had beaten another inmate with a bat during a prison baseball game and had been sent to the psychiatric wing of the prison. Indeed, he had a P number, identifying him as a psychiatric patient, but his behavior wasn't too different from that of a lot of regular inmates. It was common to hear men muttering to themselves from time to time. Keeping your distance from other inmates could be as much a necessity of survival as a sign of antisocial behavior. Kenny did his job well, mopping the floors of the kitchen and officers' mess. Most of us gave psychiatric inmates a wide berth, and the guards tended to cut them more slack than regular prisoners. One day I had just finished washing dishes and pots and was preparing to clean up the floor in my area by filling a mop bucket with hot water, when I heard a voice behind me. "What the fuck are you doing with my bucket?" I turned around to see Kenny glaring at me. There were 2 mop buckets in our area of the prison that were plainly different from each other, and I was not using Kenny's bucket. "Oh, is this the bucket you use?" I asked, knowing it wasn't, but trying to placate him. "You know that's my goddamned bucket," Kenny shouted. "Why you keep fucking with me?" I could see that Kenny was either delusional or trying to start a fight with me, so I continued to try to make peace. "I'm not fucking with you," I said. "This is the bucket I've been using, but if you want it, I'll go get another one." "Why you keep fucking with me?" Kenny stood blocking the door. As he took a step toward me, I saw that he was holding a long knife against his leg. Instantly, I lifted the bucket of hot water and drew it back, as if to throw it. "What the hell is the matter with you, man?" I shouted back at him. "If you take another step toward me, I'm going to throw this fucking hot water in your face and burn all the skin off your body." He stopped, but the commotion had attracted several other inmates and Mr. Angland, who ran the kitchen. "What the hell is going on here?" Angland demanded. He looked first at me, saying, "Put that bucket down." "Kenny's got a knife," I protested. "He came at me with a knife. I'm not going to put this bucket down until you take that knife from Kenny." Mr. Angland reached his hand out and said, "Kenny, give me that knife." Kenny did as he was told. He also obeyed Angland's order to return to his ward, but not without first shooting me a menacing look. Angland turned back to me. "I want to see you in my office, Bolden." When we sat down in his office, Angland started in on me. "Bolden, you know that you can't threaten the patients around here. You know better." He came at me with a knife. What am I supposed to do? Just stand there and not defend myself because he's a patient? "The way I saw it, the 2 of you were threatening each other," Angland said. "You had the bucket of water and he had the knife. The 2 of you threatened each other, and that's what I saw. But you didn't see the whole thing," I insisted. "I was in the back room doing my work, and suddenly this guy is standing in the doorway talking about a mop bucket. I know that he's a patient, but I'm going to protect myself. He came at me with the knife, and that's when I picked up the bucket of hot water to throw on him." "Well, you can't discipline these patients. You should have come to me. You can't threaten these patients. I'm going to have to write you up for it," he stated angrily. "You can write me up all you want to, but I'm not going to stand there and let any of these patients stab or butcher me with a knife. If I could have gotten out of the room, I would have come to you, but Kenny had the door blocked, and he was talking out of his mind about a mop bucket. You go back to the dormitory now. You'll be off tomorrow. When you come in Wednesday, you, me, and Kenny will get together and straighten out this problem," Angland concluded. In the yard later that day, I told Elijah what had happened with Kenny. Elijah didn't say much, but he had an odd half-smile on his round, pock-marked face. "You might as well get ready," he finally said. "Ready for what?" Elijah swept his hand around at the surrounding enclosures. "You see all of these fences and wire? You are in the devil's pit. This is the blazing furnace of the Holy Scriptures. Anything that the government wants to happen in here, it can make happen, unless you have the power of God on your side." Elijah's voice rose with emotion. "You don't think that Kenny came at you because he's crazy, do you?" "Well, he is a mental patient and—" "No, he's not the mental patient you think he is. You're the mental patient. He is doing what he was sent here to do, but you refuse to do what God created you to do. That's why you're in this trouble. You're going to stay in trouble until God breaks you down and you submit." Elijah had been speaking with great passion, but now he grew quiet again. "We are God's children," he said. "The power of the living God is within you. On Wednesday morning, England sent me to see Julius Nicholas, the chief of classification and parole. Nicholas turned out to be a black man, but one of those who acted and looked so much like a white man that corporations and government offices loved using them to fulfill their new minority hiring requirements. "I understand that you had a misunderstanding with one of the patients Sunday morning," he began. "Yes, sir," I answered as politely as I could. "One of the patients, Kenny, drew a knife on me while I was at work in the dishwashing room." Nicholas leaned back in his chair. "What did you do to trigger off that kind of reaction from him?" "Nothing," I said emphatically. "I was working in the back room when Kenny walked in and shouted something about a mop bucket. I looked around and saw him standing behind me near the doorway claiming that I had his mop bucket. I wasn't about to argue with him about a mop bucket, so I told him he could have it. The next thing I know, the guy has a knife in his hand, so I grabbed the mop bucket full of hot water and told him that if he came any closer to me, I would throw the hot water in his face." "So you threatened him with the bucket of hot water?" Nicholas asked. "Yeah, I threatened him after he pulled the knife on me. I was going to protect myself the best way that I knew how, and— Weren't you a state policeman and an FBI agent? Didn't they teach you how to disarm a person who was threatening you with a knife?" "What's my past employment got to do with what happened in the kitchen?" I blurted out, frustrated by Nicholas's accusatory tone. "It's your job to govern these inmates, not mine. Kenny came at me, and I have every right to defend myself." "That's not the story that Kenny told. Kenny said that you took the bucket that he was using to mop the floor. He went looking for his bucket, and when he saw you had it, he asked you for it, and you exploded, calling him all kinds of filthy names. Kenny told us that he saw a knife lying on top of a silverware tray that you had just taken out of the washer. He said he picked up the knife because you threatened him with the water." "That's ridiculous," I argued. "There was no silverware tray in the room. Kenny brought the knife into the room with him. I'm not the patient here. Kenny is the one who was hallucinating or something. He just went crazy, like he did in Arizona or wherever he beat that other inmate with the baseball bat." "Look, Bolden, don't raise your voice at me. I'm not Kenny. I know that you've been under a lot of pressure. I read the papers. Sometimes when an inmate is under pressure about things on the outside, he does a lot of things that he wouldn't normally do." Nicholas's tone became sympathetic. "I'm just trying to help you adjust to these conditions." "Help me adjust? Help me adjust to what?" I demanded angrily. "I don't need any adjustment. I have not had one argument with any other inmate since I've been incarcerated. I haven't had one write-up about my conduct or anything, and I've been locked up over a year now." "Well, what do you think we should do with you?" Nicholas asked. "Just give me another job assignment. I don't want to work in the officer's kitchen if Kenny is going to be there. I think that will be the best solution." "Okay, Bolden, you can go back to work now. I'll tell you what we decide." I hadn't even made it to my bunk when I heard my name called over the PA system. I had been summoned by Dr. Kinzel, one of Springfield's staff psychiatrists. Kinzel, a young, light-skinned black man with soft hands, introduced himself and began his questioning. "Mr. Nicholas asked me to talk to you about what happened Sunday. He seems to think that you have a feeling that you are being persecuted. Do you feel that someone is out to get you or that you are being watched?" "Of course I feel like I'm being watched. I'm in the penitentiary. Everywhere I go, everything I do is being watched," I snapped. "As far as me being persecuted, the incident Sunday has nothing to do with persecution. Kenny cannot persecute me because he does not have any authority over me. Persecution is an act of abuse of authority. You know that there has been a lot of talk about how the government framed you and how the witnesses lied in your trial," Kinzel said. "In your letters to your wife, you constantly give the impression that you are being persecuted. That's what I read into them." I was sensing something wrong, and started to get defensive. I thought that you sent for me to talk about what happened in the cafeteria. What have I been complaining about in my letters to my wife are matters verified by court records. These are documented charges that have been all the way to the Supreme Court, and the government has yet to deny any of them. It's not unusual for black people to be persecuted, if you want to call it that. Bolden, Kinsel shot back. Your problem is that you have a big mouth. You may be right in what you're saying, but you need to learn to keep your mouth shut. You had a good job and messed it up because you talked too much for your own good. If we're going to talk about my case or what was said in court, I told him, then I think you should allow me to call Attorney Hosmer into this conference. You call me in here and say we are going to talk about what happened Sunday and Kenny's threats against me, but you're asking me about what I said in court. I need to be represented by an attorney if you are going to keep talking about something that has nothing to do with Kenny, I said, struggling to keep my anger in check. I think you are being used by people who don't mean you any good, Bolden, Dr. Kinsel said. Well, for my part, I think that you and Mr. Nicholas are being used by people who don't mean me any good, too. Are you claiming that I am part of some kind of conspiracy? Is that what you're saying? Kinsel rose from his seat. I didn't say any such thing, and you know it. I'm reciting the facts, and the facts are that I was approached by a man who threatened me with a knife for no reason whatsoever. I get called into Mr. Nicholas's office, and the whole incident gets turned around to make it seem that I was responsible for Kenny's conduct. Then you send for me, and I sit here listening to you insinuate that I have some kind of persecution complex and a big mouth. We could settle this whole thing by removing me or Kenny from the kitchen. I don't think that I can feel safe working with him anymore. Kinsel didn't respond directly. You're very emotional, aren't you, Bolden? Who wouldn't be emotional under these circumstances? The room got quiet for a moment as I watched Kinsel leaf through my file. I see where you had a problem with the athletic department at the university you attended. Is that right? I didn't have any problem with the athletic department. My problem was with the unfair way that scholarships were given at Lincoln University. That's the only problem I had, I explained. The university didn't like the fact that I wrote a letter to the school newspaper and helped put pressure on the university to change its scholarship policy. The dean threatened to kick me out of Lincoln University for writing that letter, but I ended up graduating cum laude and third in a class of 97. Bolden, here again, I am concerned about your compulsion to delve into things that are not your business. These types of Excuse me, sir, I interrupted. I didn't have a compulsion to do anything. I saw a wrong and tried to do something about it. I wouldn't call that a compulsion. And you're very defensive, Kinsel continued. You are going to have to learn to control your compulsions. They are the cause of what I see as anti-government and sociopathic behavior. I realized then that I had to keep quiet. Even if this doctor couldn't get me to lose my temper, any response I made would be twisted into another reason why I should be given some kind of abnormal psychological classification. I sat there stonily until Kinsel looked up from his file and dismissed me. Back in the dormitory, I gathered my friends Elijah, Gus, and Exodine and told them, in as much detail as I could remember, about my meetings with Nicholas and Kinsel. I needed people to have that information in case something should happen to me. The next day, a guard told me I didn't have to report to the officer's kitchen. I assumed I was getting a day off in preparation for reassignment to a new job. Elijah was happy. He didn't believe that Kenny had a mental problem, which, as far as Elijah was concerned, made Kenny more dangerous than I had imagined.
Crazy Joe. Kenny. Man. Whew. Good times indeed. I did want to say, Katherine Massey Book Club, well, we might finish this here book next week. I'm going to have to look at the audio to see, but we might be out of here next Friday. We'll have to see. Anyway, but the band, when he talked about they had, before they got sent off to Leavenworth and all that, that they had a band in greater confinement, and he said that the guards called this, in quotes, good time. It was not capitalized, and I got the impression the band, like Mr. Bolden's musical group, was not called good time, that this visitation hour, or however long it lasted, 90 minutes, whatever, that period was called good time, and that they would go, a part of so-called good time would be the Bolden Band trio playing for the visitors and such. That is still kind of Good Times-y, the sitcom, which is, I mean, you know, same thing. Chicago, projects, prison, same thing. Same thing. Shout to Jimmy Walker. Negro culture, that's a Negro culture. Lots of name-calling black people in good times. The religion of name-calling black people. We miss you, John Amos, although not that much. Number to dial, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Finish off email number 1, then we'll get to our callers. Let's see, for Chapter 17, Springfield Medical Center for Federal Prisoners. Government could declare that I was mentally imbalanced or unstable or insane or whatever term they chose to use. Drapetomania, we just make them up as we sit on the lavatory. To keep me in treatment until such time as the doctors decided I was cured. The weaponizing of the diagnosis of mental illness against non-white victims by racist white supremacists is a recurrent topic on the C.O.W.S broadcast. Well-known former inmates at this facility, mafia figures Joseph Bonanno, a.k.a. Joe Bananas, John Gotti, a.k.a. Teflon Don, others. Robert Stroud, later became known as the Birdman of Alcatraz. Larry Flint, publisher of Hustler magazine. Number 2, this was it, the realization of the dream I had when I was 13, a rectangular steel vault with a tiny glass window. Me on the inside, a woman standing with 3 children on the outside. I think Dr. Welsing encouraged us to be open to receiving signs from the Creator. Mr. Fuller encouraged this as well. 3, filing a petition for a writ of habeas corpus, suspension of habeas corpus using the excuse of national security. The War Powers Act may become a tactic used by President Trump to deport so-called U.S. citizens. For example, black identity extremists, bypassing any judicial oversight. See, MAGA influencer tells Steve Bannon Trump will have no choice but to suspend habeas corpus. 4, Elijah, member of the Black Israelites. Oh, you got these old Kyrie Irving, Negro anti-Semites, African Americans who claimed a historical Jewish heritage. Exendon, a Native American from Oklahoma, that's Fuller Land. Gus, he had, not me, had followed my case so closely that he read a scrapbook of clippings about me from the papers in Cincinnati. Now, I do have a scrapbook of clippings, but I'm not in Cincinnati. VGQ, reading the articles may be more constructive than being a member of the Israelites, but I could be wrong. What did... Shame on you. What, you gonna get some old slant on that? I didn't say that, folks. That was old, our listener. I'm gonna put his email and phone number up there so y'all can dox him. Number 5, Mark Lane's rush to judgment. John Hosmer showed up at Springfield Medical Center with a man introduced as Mr. Burt. Burt turned out to be a young lawyer from Jim Garrison's 1967 William Manchester's book, The Death of a President. James Rowley, the chief of the Secret Service, testified before Congress and refused to answer any questions about the reportedly outlandish conduct of the agents in Dallas. White people are not ignorant about racism, white supremacy. Amen on that. Again, Mark Lane, his name should be so familiar from Jonestown. And then Jim Garrison, that is who Oliver Stone's nonfiction book is based on Jim Garrison. That's Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston's husband in the film, is playing Jim Garrison and his effort to bring a trial against Clay Bertrand, Clay Shaw, white man in New Orleans, allegedly now, or they say evidence, CIA agent who he was taking a trial for allegedly being a member of the assassination plot team and putting all this together. New Orleans is a key region in this assassination plan. Oswald allegedly born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he wrote a book, Garrison, on the Trail of the Assassins, that is all about his trial and his theory on what this assassination was all about. He's actually in the movie JFK. In fact, I think he plays Judge Jim Garrison. But wow, just so much. In fact, I didn't even know until we started reading this book. Mae Brussel worked. She was a volunteer on his staff. That's how because she was like many who thought the Warren Commission was wrong or lied and that there was some sort of conspiracy to kill JFK. And so she went down to Louisiana, worked on his staff. This was before she even got her radio program together. That might be how she knew about Abraham Bolden so early, to be talking about him when her radio program first came on in the early 1970s. But white people are not ignorant about racism at all. Let's see. Oh, and then importantly, James J. Rowley, they have the training center named after him. It's 500 acres. I read about that before. And James J. Rowley, it is in the documentary JFK Revisited. James J. Rowley is reportedly one of the white men who was intimately involved in setting up Abraham Bolden. And we're going to get that nigger. We're going to go get him convicted. If we have to fabricate evidence, lie, whatever we have to do, get Spagnola to get his lies together on a list, whatever we got to do. He was named specifically as one of the folks who got involved to falsely convict Abraham Bolden. And he's got the training facility now. 500 acres. James J. Rowley Training Facility. 6. My family did come and visit in April 1967. Hey, just into May. I felt sure that my then 10-year-old daughter and my 8-year-old son had figured out that the bars on the windows and the uniformed guards meant something, and that maybe I wasn't away teaching as they had been led to believe. It is probably better to be truthful with our offspring. I totally agree, but wow, this would, and even, so wait a minute, Mom. The people that killed John Kennedy and blew his brains out in the street, you think they put Dad in, you think they're going to blow our brains out? Like, woo-wee. Man, and the truthfulness, we're going to be truthful, maybe. That would be the answer to both those. In fact, the answer to question one would probably have to be not maybe. Yeah. The people who blew that the white president's brains out in the street, yeah, they probably put Dad in prison. And then, are they going to blow our brains out in the street? Maybe. We hope not. But it's possible. They could. That would be being truthful. So, woo, man, that's, I don't know. For 8, that's a lot. For 8, like, wow. Man, we have to go to school tomorrow. They're going to have rainbow toast, so, yeah. Let's see. Elijah, number 7. That guy is just using you to fill his pockets, referring to Hosmer. You have to reach inside yourself and find that power that God gave us. This seems like a truthful statement, also similar to Fuller's recommendation to think of ourselves as an army of one. Number 8. Life back at the camp didn't remain peaceful very long. A few weeks after I had returned, I witnessed the murder of one inmate at the hands of another. He threw himself on the young man standing in the elevator, stabbing him repeatedly in the belly. Word got around about what had happened, but I never said a word to anyone. Maybe a prelude to killing Bolden. If he went to the authorities, he would have been killed by the other inmates. Potentially another attempt at killing by proxy by the usual suspects. Man, Shawshank Redemption. Just that right there. It could have been so. And even if white people didn't get involved or whatever, we done got into it, and I got my knife or my shank or whatever, and it slips. And you get nicked. or I'm mad and I just got to slice up everybody here. Man, they already told you folks get killed here for over one cigarette. They didn't even say like a pack or anything. They said one cigarette can be enough to kill somebody. One bad look can be enough to kill somebody. You standing next to the wrong nigger can be enough to get killed. And then we get the encore. 9, Nicholas turned out to be a black man, but one of those who acted and looked so much like a white man that corporations and government offices loved using them to fulfill their new minority hiring requirements. I had been summoned by Dr. Kinzel, one of Springfield's staff psychiatrists. Kinzel, a young, light-skinned black man with soft hands. That's what I want to be, a light-skinned black dude with soft hands. Bolden, Kinzel shot back, your problem is that you have a big mouth. You may be right in what you are saying, but you need to learn to keep your mouth shut. You had a good job and messed it up because you talk too much for your own good. What should I have kept quiet about? The drinking? I should have just got me a sip of Jack Daniels and kept my government job. That's what I should have done. The president gets killed, and I should have, they were out cavorting and maybe lost their ID or whatever. I should have, just, They don't want to hear all that from a nigger anyway. Let me keep my benefits and everything. Like, what? What? Sound like he's saying, hey, man, don't doing no snitching, man. You just had not snitched, everything would have been fine. See, this is what happened with you. The snitches get stitches. See, I told you. Like, man, I don't even, what? Fascinating section combining subtle name-calling, Uncle Tom's colorism, referencing soft hands. Hey, I'm not mad about no soft hands. You don't have no calluses. And maybe a suggestion of femininity by not doing manly, where, hey, you get out there and pulling weeds and chopping dandelions and dirty up your fingernails and got your cuticles all that. You do all that. I don't think the young ladies like all that. They say, oh, look at that. He got all them rough calluses. He ain't got no lotion. That's what they don't. Let's see. Non-white victims arguing over how they should act on the plantation. This section encapsulates a lot of our behaviors. It is black culture. All of it, too. Light skin and all that. Black culture. We just needed a little good times. We even had the name calling in there. So, it's, hey, whoopee. But what I thought was interesting, I think Shamika Harris had pointed this out last week. Mr. Bolden normally does not say white people. Like we heard him in some of the later audio where he'll say like Europeans and that sort of thing. He normally just doesn't say white people. In this passage he did, but it's a black person who is so much like a white man, which I thought like now we can say we can explicitly identify white people, but it is to castigate a black person. Like the problem is white people and Crazy Joe and Kenny. And no count light-skinned black dudes with soft hands. And Al Sharpton, we got a long, Obama can't even give us a part. We got a long list of black people that will get on there. We get to the white people later, but then let me get back to Obama. See them light-skinned black people? He got soft. I'm done. The number is 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Obama's hands aren't that soft. He's, done good amount accusing black people of not voting for Kamala Harris, so that'd rough up your hands a little bit. Folks who dialed in, commentary to share. Shamika Harris, the confidant, retired firefighter in Florida, should be with us. Folks we missed totally, get a hand up now. Don't wait till the end. Let's see.
Ms. Harris, you want to go now?
I can go, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Evening again, everyone. So first, I guess I wanted to say something about what Confidant was talking about. She was talking about that term good time. I think that's when prisoners, people who are in greater confinement, but they're not getting in trouble all the time, they call that good time. And I think sometimes you get time off for good behavior. I don't know if he's going to get it. All right, so Session 2. This is right at the beginning of Chapter 17. He said, I knew well what the government had in store for me. I had seen how they dealt with other personnel who dared to speak out on sensitive subjects. As I understood it, the government could declare that I was mentally imbalanced or unstable or insane or whatever term they chose to use, at which point the actual length of my sentence no longer mattered. They could keep me in treatment until such time as their doctors decided I was cured. Then I would be ready to continue serving the sentence of the court. None of the time spent in psychiatric care would count toward completion of my sentence. So maybe that's why we're getting the inconsistent prison terms, because psychological treatment time doesn't count towards your sentence. But like to Mr. Bolden, he would just be like, hey, this is how long I was locked up. Now, I don't know if that's the reason. That's just a possible one. Let me see. A prisoner at Springfield could be classified in 4 different ways. He might be there for medical reasons or for psychiatric problems or because he was too difficult to handle at other federal prisons and needed to be held under maximum security conditions. The last classification was prison camp status. No reason was given in my case. I was simply sent there. White people, the classification is really important to white people, and usually they're the ones doing the classifying. And if it's a non-white person who seems like they're doing the classifying, white people are telling them what to do. I don't know. When Barbara came to visit him and he told her all of that, first off, it was very difficult for her to get there. I'd just like to take note of that. You know, she had worked her shift at Nabisco and then ridden all night on the bus in order to be in Springfield by 8:30 in the morning. He said it pained him terribly for her to see him in, you know, the prison so far away from home. But then, you know, he goes and tells her, you know, I spent a lot of our visit telling her about the dangers there and the different ways I thought the government would try to break me. And then she was gone. I'm not, I don't know, lead GQ. Say whatever you need to say to your attempted spouse. I too noted, I heard Mark Lane's name, and I was like, oh man, Jonestown. Let me see. A bad light. My caseworker accused me of misusing my visiting privileges by contacting authors and lawyers who were writing articles and books that put the government in a bad light. Usually light is not bad. It's usually desirable. You have to, I don't know. So he's in the bed. Says that same night a guard came and found me in my bunk. Come with me, Bolden. I reached toward my cabinet, but he quickly stopped me. Don't worry about bringing anything. We can take care of that later. We will bring you anything that you need from here. That would have made me nervous. Since when do prison guards bring you anything you need? That's not even to be accepted as true, I don't think. And then when he gets there, he said I could not leave the room except to use the bathroom, and even then I needed a guard to escort me. I think him not being able to use the restroom without assistant really makes him vulnerable to high-level mistreatment. The guards can just decide not to take him to the restroom as punishment. I think that's something that could happen. He talked about, he said, I don't know why I thought anything different might happen, but I had let myself get my hopes up. The judge's decision devastated me. When I got back to prison, I found out that for some reason they had decided to send me back to the camp. After a week spent in almost total isolation and the crushing disappointment of the judge's denial of my petition, going back to the camp felt wonderful, as if I had just been let out on parole. Funny how the mind works. I guess, you know, the last session I was, little things like that, just ways in which your lives can be made like incrementally easier or a lot more difficult in greater confinement. These, you know, very small details, they're a big deal. They're not that small. Him witnessing that murder, the inmate in the elevator, how that seems traumatic. The incident with Kenny, You know, he walks over and he's like, what the fuck are you doing with my bucket? And all the stuff that ensued. And, you know, the white man, well, I thought it was a white man. He said, what the hell is going on over here? England demanded. He looked first at me saying, put that bucket down. And then he's like, well, Kenny's got a knife. He came at me with a knife. I'm not going to put the bucket down until you take that knife from Kenny. And I'm just thinking, I didn't know what was better. Like, him having the bucket at first might have kept Kenny from stabbing him. Then the guard comes over and was like, put the bucket down. It's like, what's worse? Like, the bucket seems to be such focus area. And I'm not sure if it was making things better or worse. And then he talked a lot about the Kenny situation and just didn't seem to be making anything better. Like, he tells the whole story about Kenny with the knife to, I guess, some sort of doctor or whatnot. And, you know, after he tells that whole story, it's like the doctor, he says, well, you can't discipline patients or blah, blah, blah. You can't threaten the patients. I'm going to have to write you up for it. That was the guard, not the doctor. I'm sorry. And then all his talking to the doctor, none of that helped. It was like no matter what he said, it was going to be used against him. I mean, you could tell that pretty fast. And he was talking to this doctor for quite a long time before he realized, oh, anything he says is going to be used against me. You know, I should be quiet. I think it took him too long to realize that. And that guy, he did tell them, he said, Bolden, Kinzel shot back, your problem is that you have a big mouth. You may be right in what you're saying, but you need to learn to keep your mouth shut. You had a good job and messed it up because you talked too much for your own good. Thus, you acted like that was crazy. I think that's true. He did have a good job, and now he's being punished because he wouldn't stay quiet. He did talk too much for his own good. Now, it might have been the correct thing to do, but it was certainly not the safest choice. So I think that was true. Let me see. At the end there, it said, the next day, a guard told me I didn't have to report to the officer's kitchen. I assumed I was getting a day off in preparation for a reassignment to a new job. Elijah was happy. He didn't believe that Kenny had a mental problem, which, as far as Elijah was concerned, made Kenny more dangerous than I had imagined. I think the white people who told Kenny what to do are more dangerous than Kenny. I guess one last thing. When he was talking to that doctor, he said, I see where you had a problem with the athletic department at the university you attended. Is that right? And then he goes on to tell him about what happened and blah, blah, blah. Yo, right at that moment when this person in the prison has the file on him where they know what happened to him when he was in college, that's a moment to be quiet. You just need to be evaluating or maybe just something. I don't know. He talks way too much. The amount of information that they have is much more concerning than what they say they think about it at this point, and I'll close. Thank you guys for letting me speak.
Much obliged, Miss Harris. So, Agent Cross, he did the right thing? Keep your mouth closed and keep your good job?
No, I'm not saying Agent Cross did the right thing, but I'm saying him talking did get him in this position.
Okay. Talking. Okay. Much obliged, Miss Harris. I guess we already heard from retired firefighter. Much obliged for yielding. Retired firefighter.
Greetings again, everybody. I was just thinking as I was listening that Mr. Bolden's prison experience, of course, was carefully orchestrated by some very powerful people as well as organizations that we've already talked about: Warren Commission, FBI, Secret Service, COINTEMPORAL, the state of Illinois' law system. And since, when you're in prison, you have nothing but time, Mr. Bolden is slowly putting this structure together. I would say probably the reason why he didn't get killed was probably because of the position that he was in. he was basically somewhat of a structured person, no criminal record, anything like that, and was in law enforcement, a veteran law enforcement officer before he even joined the Secret Service. And the person who was primarily responsible for him being in the Secret Service was the President of the United States and his brother. So I would imagine this group of people decided that killing him would be too obvious, somewhat obvious, and it would be a situation where they take a different task to be able to destroy his credit. And then possibly from there, he could either be killed or by him losing his credit, and what he says wouldn't matter anyway. I have here all of the prior sinister organizations have to pay attention to Mr. Bolden, because that's what I'm just saying, of the position that he was in. The attempt to defend himself, that incident with the inmate, to defend himself would also get yourself in trouble. That's what I wrote down when I was hearing this, and that basically told me that this was a part of the scheme to set him up. It was like a very sophisticated setup that I think was being played out with him. I got a question to ask right quick. Was the doctor a black male or a white male?
Dr. Kinzel was a light-skinned black male with soft hands. And that probably plays a part in it also. He's probably well paid to do what he's doing. Anytime you have a black person that would join in on a scam to harm another black person, that person is probably very well paid off. At the same time, and I learned a new combination word, persecution complex. I've heard some similar words to it, but this is a somewhat of a new one. When the physician questioning him, as everybody is saying, it was like a court proceeding where he was thinking, I need an attorney, and at the same time, there was a lot of things going on during the 60s, during that time, and for something like the President of the United States murder is being brought out in the open, that some very powerful people within the government contributed to his assassination. Whoa, that would be astronomical as far as something being revealed. It's still only a opinionated, that sort of thing. It still haven't been turned factual, other than the quote unquote Warren Commission's opinion. And that's it. That's all I have. Do you, briefly retired firefighter, not for long-winded response, but just, do you think Mr. Abraham Bolden, do you think he was more well-known, influential than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at this time period, late 60s, mid-1960s?
I don't think so.
Much obliged for the response and the brevity. White people killed Dr. King during this same time period, and he was pretty prominent. So, and they killed President Kennedy. So, I don't know if Abraham Bolden would have been prominent enough to make white people pause about killing him, especially once he had been fired and convicted. Like, oh yeah, that's just, basically a raping nigger. Like, he got what he deserved. Got what he live by the sword, die by the sword. And you're out here selling documents and scamming with niggers. That's what you get now. The Confidant, did you have commentary on the second half? Might be just listening, maybe. All right, let's see. Much obliged to everyone's commentary. I'll just say quickly before we wrap up. When he said he was taken aback by the stark contrast, so they come and snatch him again, he gets moved suddenly, but he said he was less surprised this time. They do this all the time. Keep those squatters on the move. Fuller said that. He said, I was taken aback by the stark contrast with the airy camp at Terre Haute in midsummer. The camp here was darker and bleaker, with grates over the windows to remind us where we were. Still, I breathed easier and was cheered by the sight of the Holy Bible on my bunk, apparently left by the previous occupant. Now, that might be, but I thought the warden might have placed that there deliberately. Isn't that Shawshank Redemption? That's right at the beginning of the movie where he said, hey, this is salvation. And you'll be holding up the Bible. He says, your hind parts belongs to me. And he gives old Andy Dufresne the Bible. So I guess, and even if it was left by the previous occupant, they allowed the good book to be left. They check the cells and do all that. That's in Shawshank too, right? We toss the cell. Wait a minute, what you got now? Wait a minute. You're supposed to have this now. Let's see. Again, I'm just pointing it out. Mark Lane was, Jonestown happened on November 18, 1978. The House Select Committee on Assassinations was ongoing at that time. John Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. Mark Lane was pulled from those House Select Committee assassination hearings to go to South America, Jonestown. Very important. Saying Donald Freed, he was all through Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment. He co-wrote the screenplay for Executive Action, JFK movie, was intimately involved with the JFK assassination and saying that the Warren Commission lied and all the rest of it. Wrote a whole book about Jonestown too. And O.J. Simpson. Let's see. Back up a little bit. Let's see. Oh, the compensation. I don't know if Kenny, with the butcher knife in the kitchen, see, that's why I said when he said he went from working on the master's garden to working in master's slaughterhouse. And I said, ooh. I mean, I guess it depends. Maybe they give you a butcher's smock so you can stay clean. Maybe you get all the gloves and everything. Maybe you don't. But how safe is this environment? Is this an environment that, whoa, Kenny, what you got that meat cleaver? Wait a minute. Like, that doesn't sound like it. I'd rather go back with the weeds because, you don't need a meat cleaver to get the weeds. You just pull that out with your hands. So you get them old rough hands so you're not like old Dr. Kinsel. You got that old soft touch, see. But Kenny, I don't think he was compensated very well to carry out this potential hit on Mr. Bolden, if that's what this was. If Elijah was telling the truth that Kenny's not crazy and, the warden or whomever just went up and told him, hey, I give you an extra piece of cornbread, you go in there and, kill Bolden or whatever, lump him up 2 or 3 times or slice his throat or slice his face or whatever, I doubt they had to pay him a whole, like, he didn't strike me as, he really came up. Like, we're going to give you a check with a whole lot of zeros on it if you go in there and do Bolden a good one. Maybe. I don't know. Let's see. I think great point, Ms. Harris, about witnessing all of this, just being there, period. away from your children, and you don't know what's happening, and all this stress on Barbara and his mom and dad, whole family and everything, saying that they brought shame. That line where he said that his mother, she took it so hard and felt like he had brought shame to the family. Man, nothing is more shameful, if you want to use that word, than being a victim of white supremacy. It is so easy for racists to fabricate and lie and make up anything on any of us. O.J. Simpson or whatever. None of us should feel like, oh my goodness, I done brought shame on the family by, do the best you can, be about justice, but nothing is more shameful than being a victim of white supremacy. Subject to non-justice all day, every day, all areas of people activity. Let's see. He said, talk about shameful. He said it had been nearly a year since my children and I had seen one another. And you want to talk about shameful. Not that I'm saying that's Mr. Bolden's fault. He's a total victim here. But I'm saying that's the system of white supremacy. It's shame abounds. You don't have to do nothing wrong. They were growing so fast, both physically and mentally, and I felt sure my 10-year-old daughter, and that's when I said, man, I don't even know how you begin to tell them the truth on this one. At 8, yes, the same white people who blew President Kennedy's brains out in the street, they might come and do the same thing to us. You. Don't talk to strangers. man. Woo! I don't know how you feel hopeful about life hearing all that, like Jiminy. Let's see. I thought this was great advice from Elijah when he says, talking about Hosmer, he wants you to think that he cares about you. When push comes to shove, he wouldn't do one day of your time for you. You have to reach into yourself and find the power that God gave us. It's inside of you. Like any of because there's so many examples of white people coming, even Mark Lane coming. You've got black people that are in greater confinement and white people coming. Abu Jamal is such a lengthy list, and white people will come and hang out and write books and maybe bring you some brownies or whatever else. But man, at the end of the day, they write their book and go talk to Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! It sure is a shame how they done Leroy, and I visited and we talked and yum and all this. Please. Let's see. Witness of murder. Burley Kenny. He beat an inmate with a baseball bat. Even that, like, Jesus Christ. Like, you want to talk about trauma. Just hearing about that. I'm never going to the yard again. Jesus. Like, how do you run an establishment if this is true? This person attacked, even if they didn't kill him or whatever, attack someone with a baseball bat. How are they allowed to access a knife subsequently? Even a plastic knife, really, like, you're going to have to get one of them sporks and, make do with a plastic one of those. Like, man, anything that's got to be chopped, we'll chop it and just give it to you because, yeah, we remember what Dr. Nichols. Let's see. Make sure I got it right. So Julius Nichols is the chief of classification and parole. He's the one who acted and looked so much like a white man that corporations and government offices love using them. Now that's interesting because Dr. Kinzel, I did have it right. Dr. Kinzel was a light skin, so even the phenotype, and his phenotype is important in numerous important locations in the book. Lena Horne is a dignified black female, very pale, lack of melanin. He compares her to his wife Barbara, where he's right here, where he's talking about Julius Nichols being a black person who acted and looked. So I suspect that this person doesn't have too much melanin either. Probably doesn't look like Dick Gregory. And he speaks unfavorably about Mr. Nichols. And then Dr. Kinzel later on, who he's doing all this talking, who says, you talk too much. That's your problem. Where he said that's the one who is a light-skinned black person with soft hands. See? Phenotype comes up here through and through, as our caller pointed out. But again, I'm submitting he only does that, picking out white people, he doesn't do that. He'll say European, that sort of thing. And that is us consistently, where we'll have a lot more frustration and focus on non-white people who are not down with us and are not black and proud and don't help us get through all this. Other victims who help support the system, as we all do in various ways. Let's see. Anything else? They always say we're emotional. You have to see if I can find some of the articles from his protests at Lincoln University. We will, I think, maybe wrap this here book up next week. We'll have to see. At minimum, it looks like we only have one more chapter and then the epilogue. So, yeah, I think we should be done next week. Anywho, we'll be here tomorrow. Compensatory call in 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hopefully, folks have learned quite a bit about the good old Chicago. I double-checked with the confidant earlier, but now the audio is working. Did you have quick commentary you wanted to get in before we wrap it all up this here week?
Hello. I'll just reserve my comments for a later date. I did want to point out one thing, that they appear to be leading him into some form of insanity. So it called him sociopath as a label. So I think that's the point that they're, and so if he's a sociopath, how can he possibly be correct about the other agents that committed murder? So I think that's the line that they're trying to draw. But I'll reserve any other comments for another time. Thanks.
Much obliged. The Confidant. This is the book, if people are familiar, Jonathan Metzl, The Protest Psychosis. It kind of talks about this being an important time period where it started to be lots of black people who behaved like Abraham Bolden, trying to be universal man, universal woman, practice justice, counter racism. They're up. This nigger is crazy. This nigger's got schizophrenia. We got to put this nigger in a mental institution, maybe drug him, and, all of that. That was very widespread during this time period, and even tracing it back all the way to the plantation and Drapetomania and J. Marion Sims and all the rest of it. But during this time period, you had a special refinement of that technique to attack people like an Abraham Bolden, to say, that nigger is crazy around here talking about some sort of racist conspiracy and all the rest of it. I guess my last thing I would say, when Dr. Counsel, I believe it was, said, you had a good job, but you talk too much, I don't know what a good job would be in the system of white supremacy racism. He did tell us that he was told on his good job, you are a nigger. Don't forget you are a nigger, and you'll never be anything other than a nigger by an armed coworker. That does not sound like a good job. But again, I don't know what a good job would be on the plantation. Maybe the good job, they say all that when you're off duty and you don't hear it. Maybe that's a good job. Anywhoodles, we will wrap it all up next week. Maybe the confidant will give her commentary from this week and closing remarks. We'll be here tomorrow for the compensatory call in 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Reading more important than watching television. Jim Garrison book, pretty good, On the Trail of the Assassins. Racism, white supremacy, directly, indirectly, all throughout the text. Anywho, much obliged, hopefully worthy of your Friday evening. Creator, help us maximize our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Remind us not to waste non-white people's time and energy, including our own. Stop name-calling black people. Stop being discourteous to black people. Stop producing throwaway offspring. Mr. Bolden, his wife Barbara, definitely great illustrations of that, even under the worst circumstances. Oh no, we are not throwing away these black offspring. No way. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Even my conditioning has been conditioned.